I'd like to call to order the school committee meeting for December 17, 2015, and ask that we rise to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Just a brief reminder, we are being recorded, and if you'd be so kind as to silence your electronic devices, so to minimize interruption, that would be great. We'd like to start off this evening with public comment. Any public comment for agenda items or any school business? Seeing none, I'd like to move on to our student reports. Matt and Courtney, would you join us and tell us what's new?
All right, so we just started trimester 2 here, so fresh start for all the students. If some of them are hoping to do better than they did last trimester, some are hoping to continue the great success. But for us seniors, a lot of us are starting to hear back from colleges where we applied either early decision or early action. Great feeling to get a few schools under your belt that you got into. So good, congrats to all other seniors. Winter sports are officially in season now, so we've started this week with a bunch of matches and games. And the boys basketball team has their first home game this Friday against Billerica. I'd also like to congratulate Jack Kelly and Jill Boyle, who were Boston Globe All-Scholastics this fall for golf and volleyball, so hats off to them. And I'd also like to remind everyone there's still time to sign up for Relay for Life, which is February 26th and 27th, which is there to help with American Cancer Society, and it's a fundraiser at it's an overnight fundraiser at North Andover where you raise money to help support American Cancer Society.
And that's February
26th and 27th.
Okay. What's the information? More information on that?
You can find that at NorthAndoverHighSchool.com. It's under the community section. Yep.
Excellent.
And I've tweeted about it, so you can find it on
Yep.
the North Andover Public Schools website.
What's the overnight feature?
So you walk throughout the whole night. So there's plenty of time at 3 a.m. if you're interested.
Can you tweet and what?
I'm going to try.
Yep, this new trimester is setting off so far well. Definitely, I know a lot of kids are aiming to do better because they're not in their summer trance anymore. And also, the Interact Club has been doing this food drive, but it's not really well promoted. So I know the president has talked to me about it and how she wants to get more promotion out there about their food drive. There's 1 or 2 cans in their box, and I really hope that gets promoted well and ends off well. And also, well, yeah, it's going pretty well. I still get confused between what lunch I have throughout the days, but it's working well for everyone.
That's a big thing. I was just getting used to the old lunch schedule now. It's a whole new one. So
I'm completely forgetting every single one.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Happy holidays.
Happy
holidays. We'll see you in January. So hopefully everyone's going to be driving carefully. There may be white stuff between now and then.
Stay
Indeed, enjoy.
Don't talk about that stuff.
No white stuff. Great, moving on to the consent agenda. First item is a donation from the North Andover Merchants Association. So I'd like to take a motion to accept the donation so that we can talk about it. And second?
Second.
Great, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Pease, and I'm the president of the North Andover Merchants Association. And with me is Sylvie Folds, who is the chair for the Fall Festival Committee. So this year, one of our goals was to raise some more money for the robotics program at the middle school. So the money was donated to the North Andover Middle School Robotics Team. And what we purchased was the VEX Competition Field Perimeter Kit, VCR Nothing But Net Full Game Object and Goal Kit, Robot C for VEX Robotics Team License, 6 seat, VEX Competition Fees, the first Lego Leave fees, and the team shirts, which totaled $2,199.20.
Unbelievable.
And to explain that to you, I'm going to hand it over to Guy so he can tell you what those things were that we purchased.
So as you're aware, the Merchants have been a great partner with our after-school robotics program, donating almost to date a total of $10,000 over the past 2 years to our program. The students are fully engaged, and the greatest thing about the Merchants being a part of this is that the students are able to participate free of charge. So there's no issues with not being able to pay for competition fees or equipment or anything like that on the students' behalf, which I think is really quite great that the merchants are able to do that for us and for the students of North Andover, more importantly, to give them access, full access to the program. We had our first competition, and Mr. Limpert was there at the high school on November 21st. We were the only middle school team. We competed against 43 other high school teams, and one of our teams made it to quarterfinals as a middle school team. So we're very excited about that. We have a competition coming up January 16th. Well, we have one 16th too. We have a busy weekend. So we have one the 16th and the 17th of January. And the kids, I mean, are loving it. We're up to about 30 members, and we're hoping to branch off. We have 2 teams currently. We're hoping to branch into 3 to 4 teams next year. So I can't thank the merchants enough for their generosity and their willingness to support the program.
With this donation, does that give you your own field?
Yes.
Your own field?
Yeah, we have everything we
That's
need.
huge.
Yes.
And do you have a location to keep it set up all the time?
No, that we don't have yet. We'll be working on that.
Well, negotiate with the principal, right?
Yeah, we need more space, but it's easy to break down.
Yeah.
We set it up in such a way that we can put it up and break it down for the meetings.
Well, good for you, but so you don't have to go to the high school and use their field and all of
Yeah.
that. So that's
Yeah,
great.
much more
That's
accessible.
huge.
Yes. Yeah, so-
Can you give me
Congratulations.
30 students, that's great. Is that a growing number, or has that been flat for you?
No, that's been growing over the years, yeah. And so we've had to purchase more equipment and do things a little bit differently because of the growing numbers. But as you know, having the support of the merchants again has enabled us to do that.
Super.
Yeah.
Yes, anything on the back?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Free plug.
If I might also add, Guy has been a big help to us during the Fall Festival as well. He participates on the committee. He's down at the Fall Festival all day volunteering. He's also gotten some of the kids to come down and participate too. So it's an all-round thing. It's not just what we've done, but him and the kids participate in what we need to accomplish too. They're a big
Great
help.
community partnership.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments, questions? No? Great, hearing none, I'd take a vote to accept the donation as presented from the North Andover Merchants Association in the value of $2,199.20. Say aye. Aye. All opposed? And none abstentions. Great, thank you again.
so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the support.
Yes, happy holidays.
Thank you.
Will you bring us swag next time?
Video would be great, too.
Yeah, we'll work on that next.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda this evening is approval of the minutes from our meeting on December 13. Entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And discussion? Any changes, corrections? That was pretty good with the for the summary. We all set? Great. So all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And abstained. Great. That's a 4-0. I'm sorry.
Just for Bev's benefit, on the first item, we just had a vote. I don't think, we didn't have a motion in a second.
We did.
We did. I took a motion prior to...
Before that?
Prior to us
Okay.
having discussion on the
Thank
topic.
He's getting pretty good. He's reached us that.
It's good tutelage, right?
Yeah, we're trying to vote on stuff we haven't motioned. Yeah.
Great. So briefly on the chair's report, I know it's entering into the holiday season, so I know people's minds are elsewhere. Unfortunately, one of our members is elsewhere. Mr. Teresi has forwarded information that he would not make it this evening. He's stuck in Boston. We pass along condolences and wish him a safe and speedy trip back. Other than that, I just want to focus on our agenda this evening. So on to the chair report. Well, excuse me, on to the superintendent's report.
Great. So I forwarded last week and then again this week my entry report. The idea of this is really to kind of sum up my entry and kind of say, okay, we are done with the entry, which I would really want to get done prior to introducing my budget on January 7th. So that's the reason for the timing of this. And my plan is to actually send this out to all the faculty and staff of the North Andover Public Schools by Monday, if possible, and also all the parents, and just to kind of share all that I've learned and I've heard. I don't want to go over this report in any detail except to really allow you guys to talk with me about it, but I would like to draw your attention, if you have a moment, to page 10. Page 10 is new since you got it, and the reason for that is, as I have shared this report, I shared it with the leadership team on Monday and made some edits, and then I met with Carla Bear, my mentor through the NISSIP program, and she really recommended that I put in my school visits as part of what I've seen. I talked about the data, I talked about what was what people had reported to me on the survey, but she felt it was pretty important that folks know that I've been out and about in the community and what I have noticed that will then better lay the groundwork for kind of the 4 areas I want to focus on. So I want to give you a minute on page, no, you had done this one. This is on the one I just gave you. So it's, if you would just take a minute on that one, I apologize, but I literally just completed this yesterday and didn't want to get your inbox. So I'm just going to give you a minute to look at that, and then I would love any comments in general about the report.
Great. And it seems very consistent with the feedback and the presentation you provided to us. I do like the overlap with the technology plan, which we'll hopefully be hearing and seeing tonight. So my feedback to you is I think this at least summarizes what you presented to us, and it's got a lot more detail, especially with the community comparators and the reasons why those are not always an easy parallel.
Yep.
So I appreciate the detail. And you know me, I'm data-driven, so...
There's a lot of data in here.
A lot of data, so I do recommend, when people do receive this and when it is posted, that you spend some time to review it.
Right.
So I'm just, obviously I didn't really get a lot of time to look over the school visits piece that's here, but I do appreciate very much that you've kind of included this here. The only, I feel like I'm really echoing, sorry. The only thing I think as we really start to look at the budget, I mean, we've always kind of looked at numbers of students in classrooms, for example, and been concerned about where they are. And I think when we look at this and clearly see, 40% of our classrooms are above our recommended guidelines, and we're at almost 27 students at some of the related arts. I mean, I know we're bound by some literal physical places where we can break these out, but
You're setting up my January 7th.
I know that. I know. I do that sometimes.
I really appreciate that.
But 40%, I mean, I think is just very staggering.
And I think our middle school class size averages, we've done some work recently disaggregating between core academics and related arts, and you'll see that as part of my budget presentation. Middle school has the highest average class sizes in the district by far.
Yep, absolutely. But I do want to say as well, I mean, the fact that you kind of made over 90 school visits, it's very interesting. I mean, my kids obviously know who you are because I've met you on multiple occasions, but other kids that I know will say, oh, Dr. Price was in my classroom today. I don't know why they sometimes feel like they need to tell me that.
Keep telling him, kids.
But I think the visibility that I think you are being at the district and in the classrooms, and not that I think other superintendents haven't, the proximity, the office and
it's great.
Ease to be able to get to the classrooms, I think is great, and I think that helps to bring about the observations and some of the thoughts that you have here with the teachers, and just kind of seeing some differences with the curriculum as it occurs from school to school, specifically at the elementary level. So hopefully that's something that continues, and I know school's only really been in session for about 4 months or so, but I would encourage, as we continue through the year to start to continuously kind of update us on, where we can make some streamlines of curriculum. So, but this is very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate this new data. That's good. I guess the question is going to be how we're going to come up, what your response is going to look like to the other data you already gave us, free and reduced lunch, special needs, and ELL. Because those are a different kind of a challenge to these. These are one kind of challenge. This is sort of the regular challenge, and that's a different challenge. And I think once people see that, they will probably want to know what the solution for that's going to look like. So that's, I think, it's good to have highlighted that. And I think people may, in fact, be surprised about the income level data. I don't think most North Andover people would say, oh yeah, we're 17%. They wouldn't think that. They'd say 5 probably, or some small number. So I think that will be interesting, and I think that will be something I'm sure people will be looking for. The other thing that struck me when I was reading it again was, because now you've laid out your view of the 4 strengths and 4 challenges. Maybe it's always this way, so maybe I just never thought this thought. Are strengths always sort of qualitative and challenges always sort of quantitative? So I'm thinking to myself, so how do I take those strengths and translate them into something that now affects the challenges? And it's sort of hard. Our community loves our schools. Okay, how does that help with ELL? You know, and I'm just saying, maybe it's always that way, and I just never thought about that that's the way it sort of sorts itself out. Strengths are qualitative and challenges are quantitative, but it might be worth, 10 minutes of thought on your part to say, how can I sort of translate the strengths into the challenges somehow? If you did a matrix, right?
Yep, I understand what you're saying.
It's a new thought, but if you could, I think that would be helpful, and it might give us all some sort of focus on how we could help. Do you know what I mean? I think
the reality is the place that we're going to have those conversations is when I present my budget on the 7th. And then as we move, as you look in the next steps, this idea of me identifying 3 to 5 key strategies and then actions, that's really when we're going to take the strengths that we have and leverage them to meet the challenges.
But an example might be where you say, we really are strongly supportive of our schools. If you can identify, for example, new PTO initiatives that quantitatively support our schools.
So you have about 20 minutes till you hear about that one. And I would also just say that, when you talk about the strength of the schools, Mr. Gilligan and I had a great opportunity today where we have created a homework club over at the Woodridge. And we were there today to give out certificates for excellent attendance to kids, and we brought some gift certificates and some Connect 4. I don't know how the dollar store, was that you, Mr. Gilligan? So, and there were 23 kids there today doing homework after school with one of our teaching assistants paid through our Title I funding. And so when you talk about a strength, we have this strong community at Woodridge. We were able to quickly leverage support for homework support over there. And then the teachers and the principal, mostly the students go to the Atkinson, is just talking about it's making a really significant difference for those kids. So there's an example of the strength of community being leveraged to address a need. And we're not waiting for a budget initiative for that. It's already been up and running for a few months at this point.
So that would nicely fill that box.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
But there's just an example.
That's great.
Well, I appreciate the report, and I especially appreciate getting feedback on the school visits. I think this is the first time that we've really gotten so much feedback about the school visits. And I think that your observations are pretty right on the money in terms of what we're seeing in our schools. And I think it's a great way for us to segue into next steps. So thank you for including this.
Great.
My only other question would be, now that the accountability data is out, is there any way to sort of not use that as a measure, but use that as part of a discussion where those charts are so, at least they make some clear picture of something without getting into all the gory details?
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So I would like you to look at page 5, which is the school percentile ranks that just came out. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to turn some of this over to Greg and let him talk about it. Greg.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
I've been called Greg all
I know. to Gilly.
That's good.
This is the latest accountability data that came out, and North Andover is a level 2 district, and your ranking is whatever your lowest rated school is, and when North Andover's level 2, that's what your entire district is. So this here, though, Stan, probably would be the easiest because it's an aggregate of all this math, science, and ELA performance over the past few years. And this puts each of our schools versus every other elementary school in the state in a percentile rank, 1 versus 99, 1 to 99. It does the same with our middle school, and it does the same with our high school. So, yellow would be 12, 13, 14, and red is 15. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of how we do against every community at every different level in the Commonwealth.
And I would say it's pretty remarkable that every school is moving higher in the percentile rank. It's not just, you're doing better. You're actually doing better compared to, and this is really, as I talked about, really impressive data. Many of our schools, I'd like to look at Atkinson specifically, up 9 percentile ranks in a year. Kittredge, so there's some real movement, yet every school is moving in the right direction. And this is not a chart you see often, and I think it's a real testament to the work that Gilly and Hutch and the principals have been doing for the last number of years, really focusing on collaboration and looking at this work. So this is really this is a real strength, I see.
And without giving away any of Jen's secrets for January 7th.
Well, we're going to be giving away a few tonight
I think it's pretty exciting to be able to build on this movement with some really creative and well thought out plans moving forward. And that's really exciting. And I'm glad she pointed out the Atkinson School. I just want to highlight, you could talk about any school making progress because it's all excellent, but the work that the Atkinson School has done, particularly with some of the challenges that the students there face, has been absolutely remarkable. And I commend all the staffs for continuing to move forward, but you got to, when you move up from 36 and 12 in the 36th percentile to the 56th percentile, that is remarkable. So.
It's clear we know we have strengths within the schools, and everything going in the right direction is a very good sign. Obviously, we need to figure out how to get everybody moving higher, and that's I think part of the January 7th conversation.
Yeah, and this is impressive.
Yes.
Very much so, but I do think that there might be one more look we could take at some of that DESE data, because for me it always helps highlight the subgroups.
Yep.
Those sub-cohorts that you're focusing on in
Right.
particular. I think that was...
Which we did, and...
Yeah. Right, but, this chart.
Yeah, that chart,
I know.
I understand,
Right.
but I don't find that nearly as helpful as the pretty massive MCAS presentation that we did that I actually linked to in this report.
Okay.
So that's all there, and I only showed one example, which is the example that really shows that our students with disabilities are performing below the state average,
Yes.
where our low-income and Hispanic students are often performing at the state average. So there's no doubt, and I think that the data is very useful, but I think it's very hard for non-educators or non-statisticians to look on the DESE website, so the idea is to how to make it as accessible as possible.
I understand. I would not claim to understand
Yeah.
what that report really means.
Right.
So I think this graph is certainly helpful, and it's nice to see how we are comparing instead of just the light communities or whatever.
This is everybody.
Right, this is everybody,
Right.
which is actually was my first question, and it was that I sent to Jen earlier in the week, and I think this is great. I think, again, the part that's, I think, still very concerning, though, is there's such a difference between the different elementary schools, and I think that's certainly very problematic, and hopefully that will be a primary focus.
And my concern is where the difference is not reflective of a demographic difference. And that we need to be, you're going to see some differences around demographics. I would love, obviously like to make those differences less, but that it's a concern if there isn't the demographic difference.
Yeah, and these data just confirm the areas of most critical area for development that you've identified. So it sounds like what we talked about last time is consistent, and these data just further support that. So, and do you see anything new or different that you would move into the list or take out?
No, I mean, this is just because now they finally were able to release Park. This is data we're normally used to getting in August. And the presentation that we gave earlier this year, we could have told you about what this was going to be. We weren't surprised by any of this data.
So Park schools are not in this, right?
Park schools are included in this.
They're included, yeah.
In this?
Yes.
So the reason the
2015 data?
percentile ranks took so long to come out is because Park released information, and they're using some type of bridge converter to compare. And if you want, I could, well, no, we have Park MCAS later.
Yeah.
So the Park data,
This is all districts, no matter
Yes.
whether you took Park or MCAS?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why we normally, so again, we weren't surprised by any of this, so this is nothing really new. It's just a different number that, kind of puts it all in one place.
and that's why the levels took so long, because Park data, as Dr. Price can tell you, her daughters just got their individual student reports, that you got your North Andover reports a long time ago for your own kids.
Yeah, I got them last
Last week.
Monday
Yeah.
Really? Because of Park?
because of Park. My kids took Park, and I have to say that I struggled to understand what they were telling me. So, there we go.
You were penalized by Park.
Well, I think that the material you provided here also will help us in our community pro forma that
Yep.
we have as part of our deliverable. So I think this will be helpful, just rounding off how we express where we are, where our challenges are, and the greatness that is happening. So.
And I'm just going to add one other thing. I mean, I think you could have done this presentation lots of different ways, and the format's great, but I actually really respect the fact that you called out some places where we're just lacking. And you could have done you could have very easily kind of done this and just really focused on strengths and opportunities that are there, but really kind of identifying where there's significant work to be done. I think just puts it completely out there, and again, timely, because we've got January 7th coming up, so.
Right.
But I think it's great. Thank you.
Right.
So this should go out this week?
It's gonna go out. I think if I send it tomorrow, it will probably get buried in inboxes, so
Yeah.
I'm planning to send it Sunday night or Monday morning.
And a tweet would also be helpful?
I'll tweet.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Moving on, the next item is a second reading and approval of the, I'm sorry, wrong topic. We're on to the 2016 budget status report. So, Mr. Mealy?
This is
Is this the same as what we?
the same, the
Okay.
overall report is the same, yes.
From December 3rd, right?
And I'll just draw your attention to, I presented to, Dr. Price and I presented to FinCom Tuesday night, the budget status report, as we had promised them that we would do so monthly. And the change since the last report, I think, to you guys, is that while we're still projecting $150,000 that we'll have to access the stabilization fund for at the end of the year, right now we're at $77,260 with some students who are still in 45-day assessments, and we're working to try to bring some of those or allow some of those to stay in district instead of being placed out, but we're still projecting $150,000 out of the stabilization fund for the end of the year.
Did you get any sense from the Finance Committee about their reaction to taking $150,000 out of the stabilization fund?
No, actually, the question had come up the first presentation to them, and I had indicated that it looked like it was about $150, and they just wanted to know and make sure that we keep them up to date as the year goes on. They appreciate the monthly reports.
Yeah. Cool.
Mr. Miller, can I just ask a quick clarification, because there's, I don't know, if it's just not listed here, but on the actual budget report.
Yep.
Yes, so where it says the 44% on that first line of district-wide, could you just explain that percentage?
Yeah, that one, it's a good question, because basically what happens is, for some of our employees, we're almost halfway through the year. Those are our full-year employees.
Yep.
So they should be reflected as a 40-something% spent for the year, whereas school year employees should reflect something close to a third, in the 30%.
Okay.
So that's what you'll see as you look through this report. And some of the lines are mixed, and that's and some may even be more than that because they were summer employees. Like you see the 89%, the salaries other. In that case, we have IT help and custodial help that are only summer employees.
And that's just where.
So and that's completely spent. Or we won't see any more of that. So that line is pretty much spent.
And so so the first column is what we've actually spent, or is that what the budget is? And
That's the
second?
budget, correct. The first column is the budgeted amount, and then the second column is how much has been spent so far.
Okay, all right, so then that's the percentage of the budget.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had a similar question. Are we burning hot in the central office? But it makes sense if they're full-time or full-year employees that they would be a majority of the encumbrance. So.
Correct.
So, Mr. Mealy, how would we use those percentages, given that they're kind of...
Yeah, I guess if you have any questions that come up, if there's this line, I would identify a line that I thought was spent more than we really thought it should be.
Okay.
So for instance, another one, close to the bottom there, general supplies custodial, we purchased most of our custodial supplies for the year. It's paper towels and toilet paper, we
right,
store them in the
sure.
Atkinson, so that line's pretty much spent as well.
When you presented to FinCom, were there any questions about the 150 that it was removed from the op budget, and the fact that it looks like we're 77 grand in is really artificial based on the fact that the special ed stabilization was not in the op budget this year? Do you think that was clear?
Well, that's what the purpose of stabilization fund is. Right.
So the fact that we believe we're going to need to access those funds is not a surprise and shouldn't be a surprise.
Correct.
Not at all. I mean,
Correct.
But that's by design.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I did highlight for them that we started the year with $344,000 in contingency of our own, that we've gone through that.
Right.
And now, that's why we would have to access the stabilization fund. But yeah, they're not surprised at all.
Okay, good. That was my biggest concern, that suddenly it's like, wait a
No,
minute, where'd that
and
come from?
we also had the discussion about, how we might manage this going forward, and we talked about trying to convert circuit breaker from a budgeted item to a true reimbursement that could be a contingency. So we've had those discussions as well.
Okay. Good.
So one thing, for utilities, for example, it looks like some of them are,
Yeah, some of them have been encumbered and some haven't.
okay,
We've encumbered like what we expect to spend for most of the year, and other utilities, we haven't. Just depends on the utility.
say that again, I'm sorry.
Some of them we encumbered the full amount, or what we expect to spend for the year, and some we're just paying as we go for the year.
Budgeted, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Okay.
so what would you say would be true about most of these items in the expense column? Are they mostly expenses, or are they mostly encumbrances, or what?
For the most part, expenses are going to be just expenses as they're done. But
Yeah.
utilities, we did encumber some of those.
Okay.
And then salaries, well, no, what you're seeing is just the year-to-date spend.
Okay.
If we were doing encumbrances for a salary line, it would be 100%.
Right, okay.
For the most part.
Okay. So would those utilities be expenses to date? They shouldn't be encumbrances in this report.
Only in that those are showing up as an expense, so they're covered. But I think they're the only ones that we do that on.
I mean, it just makes it,
Yeah, and that's something we can work.
Yeah,
But
I mean-
we had the transition from Camille to Tracy.
I understand.
And Camille, did a very good job, but had her own way with the utilities.
well, I just think, it makes those few line items a little hard to interpret in
Yeah,
this report.
we can address that.
Because you don't know what's been expended,
Right.
even though it's been encumbered. I mean,
Yep.
let's say by this time we'd spent 100% of the encumbrance.
Right.
It would be like, that's not good.
Yeah. We'll make the adjustment for the next report, and that was the idea of this one, to
Yep.
identify those where we'll only have expenditures year-to-date for everything.
This is light years better than the other report that comes directly out of the Munis program. This at least is usable.
Right, well, this did come from there. It's still not where we want to be, because we would prefer that this came directly from Munis, but what we did is we downloaded into Excel, and I produced this report from that.
Okay.
But the reality of the situation, looking at the bottom line, is we're a third of the way through the academic year, and we're a third of the way through our spending. So
Overall,
it's not
correct,
like-
yeah.
And as we've been told,
We're not going,
the only place that we're over is in our special out-of-district.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's good.
Yep.
And I think it's good to point out, I mean, obviously things like textbooks and, supplies and all that stuff, I mean, that it's great that that's purchased and we're still at 33%, but, still got
Right.
the winter months to come,
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Can I, just a very silly question, but salaries other, is that teacher assistant?
For the most part, custodians is obvious,
Yep.
nurses obvious, professional includes teachers and administrators.
Okay,
Other could be, it's definitely teaching assistants and tutors and other positions
Okay.
that aren't in the other categories.
okay,
But the bulk of that would definitely be teaching assistants.
okay.
Yep,
I just wasn't sure if they were included in professional or not.
they're not.
Okay,
Do substitutes go in there as well, or how's that?
That's in a separate line, instructional support services, ISS, are for substitutes. And then for those who are in for long-term, we have a line for long-term subs.
Is this still basically the DESE chart of accounts? That's basically what we're following, these categories?
We have included in our account number are elements of the DESE.
Chart of accounts.
Right, exactly. We maintain those so that we can still provide the information necessary for the end-of-year report.
Okay.
And, frankly, we've become used to those as ways to identify items as well.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Nope. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mealy.
thank you.
Moving on, we have our second reading of and approval for the 2016-2017 school calendar. And I think, Dr. Price, we asked, or I asked if you'd be able to provide two views of the calendar, one before, not before, after, but two calendars showing one with the reinstatement of the religious holidays and one which is our current plan or current trajectory, which is not to include them. I know we don't have any public here, although we did receive some public comment that I'd like to read into the minutes when we're done with the discussion. So do you want to just walk us through a little bit of the information that we have?
Yeah, you asked me to give you two calendars, both starting after Labor Day. So we did that. The first one is with celebrating only federal holidays and our breaks. And the second one is with the inclusion of 3 additional holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Good Friday.
Good Friday.
So both start after Labor Day, which would be the 6th. You'll see that the last day with 5 snow days would be June 22nd, without celebrating those 3 holidays, and the last day with 5 snow days would be the 27th with celebrating those holidays. The other thing you asked us for in your deliberation was to say how many snow days we've had since 2010. You will see that information: 6 in 2014-15, 4 in 2013-14, 6 in 2012-13, 1 in 2011-12. I'm hoping for that.
Yes.
And, and then 2010-2011 was 5.
So 5 is a good budgeting number for.
Yeah, so it doesn't, 5 is what normally schools kind of put in because it's kind of about right.
But that says we shouldn't expect to not use 5.
It does say that most years you're using 5.
Right.
Or
Yes.
close to it. We had one year where it was 1. I remember that year. We got out quite early, at least where I was working.
Give us much rejoice.
So I think that's the information you asked for, and we have here for you.
So I think we also, the reason why I asked for these rather than starting before Labor Day and after is I think the preponderance of the evidence when we did canvass the community was, I think, less than 35% were interested in starting school before Labor Day. And I think the feedback we heard both in our email and as well as public comment was that's consistent. And I think, Ms. Warren, you brought up some very good points about early to school is problematic, where there may not be those opportunities to provide the care when the families are back at work.
Jim does have the survey that we did specifically on the Labor Day question. That's the information right there for you. It's just so you have that. Sorry, that was the, if you scroll down, Jim, you'll see it. It's 64%, 63.6%, I believe, wanted it after Labor Day, and then 33.4% wanted it before. So I think that, keep going, one more. There we go. So that's the information.
Yeah, and again, admittedly, this is not a scientific survey, although it does represent over 1,600 survey respondents, which is...
What human surveys are
This is from a few
scientific?
years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, it
I
is.
think the
It's
other
like
problem
3
too is that
years.
this, I think, never really took into account the late starts. I mean, like this year, it was...
It's the late as possible.
I think if we had, I think it all in the question that you ask.
Right.
I just wanted to present
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much.
That makes sense. So I think what it boils down is we heard, I think, loud and clear from several members of the community, in particular, that Yom Kippur is a very important holiday which seems to no longer be on the calendar, and it had been. And more importantly, which concerns me is the way that these religious observances are perceived as a penalty for students in school, as opposed to, in an ideal world, there would be no question. You wouldn't have to make a decision between a religious observance or going to school. That would just be a natural and an easy decision for a student and a family. And as we heard, I think, last meeting, that's not the case. Students feel that they don't want to miss any school because things happen. And I think we also heard that I think the level of consistency on how to handle religious observance or known religious observance may not be consistent across the district. So I also asked that we put into our packet the school absence policy, which basically recognizes that we don't recognize religious events. However, those are clearly excused absences, and I think that, as we also discussed, one of the things that I'm interested in hearing before we decide what to do or not to do about reinstatement or not reinstating religious holidays on our calendar is what we might do differently moving forward, so that the families who do want to or need to take days off for religious observance aren't conflicted with, I'm going to lose a day of school and I'm going to lose a significant day of teaching and learning, or I'll be penalized when I return because there was an assignment issued or a test is given, what have you. So that's what I'd like to start the conversation with, if we could.
So I reported that to you 2 meetings ago, and it's no different than when I reported, which was that I will make sure that I send something to each of the faculty and staff members in the North Andover Public Schools around religious holidays, especially in the fall, around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And that isn't to say that I don't think principals have been doing it. I'm just hoping that maybe as the superintendent I might have more, who knows, we'll see. And then also that, it is unrealistic to ask that no new material be covered on a religious holiday, but it is very realistic to make sure that there are no assignments, no assessments on those days. And it is realistic to say that if a student has an assignment due, that there's no penalty, obviously, per your policy, that those aren't due that day. So, and then the last thing is what I talked about in terms of notification is just really understanding what those 2 holidays are about, that a kid is really not able to get work done as they're, spending most of their time, for instance, on those 2 in Temple, et cetera. And then, the only other thing that we talked about was, at least for Yom Kippur, for next year, you set the calendar and then I set the early release days. I had committed as the superintendent to make sure that one of the early release days was on that day. It works, it's a Wednesday, that's fortuitous. But so at least it would be a shortened day rather than a regular day that they would miss. So, but that's, as I reported, that's pretty much, the kind of the no new work is really problematic because it's really early on in the year. So, and even later in the year, it's hard to ask most kids to come to school and do nothing new for a whole day. So, however, the assessments and the assignments are something that's really reasonable.
And could there be a no homework policy on those days?
So, a no homework policy on, we'd have to figure out what we would mean by that. No homework due that next day.
The day before.
Yeah, the day of the night,
before,
well,
and
so it's a night, it's
that
like,
same,
right.
2 nights in a row.
So, yeah.
Because of the sunset.
Yeah,
Right.
so, I have, it's a new question. I put in a no homework policy in my last district, and it takes a lot to do that. So I could absolutely think about it, but it's not just such a simple thing to do, because what does that really mean? And there would be some pushback from teachers around 2 nights of no homework, but maybe we could think about 1 night or something like that. But I don't want to commit to that, because it took us a year and a half to put in no homework nights in my former institution, with lots of surveys and lots of parent and student and teacher input. So it's something that at a table, at a school committee meeting, I wouldn't want to commit to.
Okay. What I'd like to do is read in a comment that we all received, if that's reasonable. First, I'd like to read is from Ms. Holly Vetke Lynch on Raleigh Tavern Lane. She indicates, I'd like to state my preference for starting school before Labor Day. As Ms. Warren pointed out in the last meeting, that week before school starts is very difficult for working families, as there are no camps or childcare opportunities then. Taking vacation that week is usually not possible for parents who work in accounting, last week of the month, higher ed, or K-12 ed, and in other districts, most of whom do start before Labor Day. Additionally, pre-Labor Day start gives the district more flexibility in making up snow days in June, something that becomes even more important if Jewish holidays are non-school days. So that was one piece of feedback that we received. And the other I'd like to read in is from Elise Leifer, who indicated, when voting on such items, religious holidays as school days off, it's important that each school district makes its decisions based on the constituents of the community. While certainly a minority, as with most every other city, town in Massachusetts, the Jewish population is certainly one of significance in North Andover. In addition, while Jewish families make up a minority of students in towns such as Andover, etc., Andover and other neighboring towns have been able to keep the Jewish holiday observance as school days. We ask that North Andover consider Andover's interpretation of public policy and discretion of when to honor days off. Lastly, if the school committee believes it cannot honor religious holidays on the school calendar, such as designations, I would ask that you consider this. It seems that the school committee has found a creative and flexible way to observe Christmas and other non-denominational winter break that coincide with Christmas. We'd like to suggest that we'd like to suggest that the same kind of creativity and flexibility, such as thinking of as offering a non-denominational break professional development day or early release day that coincides with Jewish holidays. We'd like to see the school calendar take into consideration the growing population of Jewish people who live in the community and who would like to continue to live here and educate our children in this town. And again, that was Elise Leifer on Hickory Hill Road. So again, we have feedback, we have precedents, we have policy. At this point, unless there's a further discussion, we do have to make a motion on which calendar to accept. And if there's no conversation, or if there's no further conversation, I think we have to get to that point.
Shall I make a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to hear one of two motions. One is to accept the calendar.
We're not discussing the calendar at all?
Well, what I'd like to do is bring one of the calendars to the floor, and then we can discuss that.
Sure.
If that would be okay? So just to move through the procedure, if we can either have a motion to move the calendar that starts after Labor Day and has religious holidays, or the calendar that starts after Labor Day and does not have religious holidays. One of those two.
I move to implement for the 16-17 school year calendar that starts after Labor Day and has no religious holiday.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, so that's the calendar we're now discussing. And I think that the calendar clearly shows professional development on Yom Kippur, as Dr. Price.
Yes, an early release. And just a reminder that we have professional development on the presidential election day,
Right.
which is an additional complication for next year.
Right.
It's like the perfect storm.
It is the perfect storm. Although Yom Kippur's on a Wednesday, so at least that's something.
Okay. So I think, my take is it would be great to be able to put all the calendar days back in, but that definitely goes in contrary to our policy. And I do feel that as our Muslim population grows and our other religious group population grows, we have to be consistent. Although it troubles me that we have a Santa parade and not a winter holiday parade, that's a different issue. But I think what's being proposed here makes sense. It's a compromise, and I think it gives us another year to see if Dr. Price and the proposal can actually, get the ideal situation where there is no personal penalty for doing a religious observance.
Right. I agree with that.
Any other comments or any other thoughts here?
The only other thought that I had was in October, and I don't know if we're locked in with certain days, but I just look at the week of the 10th and the week of the 17th, and in just 7 days you have, we have the holiday off, the 10th, but then you have the early dismissal on the 12th, and then the following week, the 2 half days for conferences. I don't know if there's any flexibility in maybe when the conferences might be, again, because, in a 7-day span to potentially have 4 work days interrupted for family. I think what I would hate to see is for families to have to then choose between like taking work day off to be able to come into conference versus just having to cover like time off. And I think it gets complicated, and I think especially where the state is really pushing towards family and community engagement and getting parents and guardians involved and meeting with teachers in the schools. Just want to make sure that we're being supportive in the way that we line up all these days together. And another question I had the last meeting too was when we have half days like the 17th and the 18th, and again, it's not exactly with the calendar discussion, but I think it builds here is, what can we provide through community programs to make this more accessible to families? So if for example, they could have the 17th and the 18th coverage for children, whether they're in Kids Stop or not for that half day part, it's, again, I think we just need to be cognizant of working families and all of this at one time.
And the other thing you had talked about also was the idea of doing maybe morning conferences, and I don't know if that's part of the contract, but that might be something we could bring up in IBB.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Is doing first thing in the morning and starting school late, which might make it easier or harder. I
think it's one half dozen.
Right. Yeah.
I don't.
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead.
And I'd just say with the conferences, the ability of the conference, they get a big chunk of parents in, but I will say that our teachers go above and beyond, because when you have 26 or 27 elementary students in a class, and some of those classes in the 40% that are over, their teachers are really creative and they work really hard. So it's very common for teachers to have a parent in, the week before or the week after on a Monday morning, a Tuesday morning, or after school on other days, but they are able to, with prior planning, really bang out a big chunk of parents that come in on those 2 half days. So that's been the experience.
I've always experienced the teachers have been wonderful about accommodating parents and schedules and so on. I think that the part that I struggle with is that within 7 school days you have 4, you've got the federal holiday, an early dismissal, and 2 really early dismissals. And I think it's problematic just in terms of all that happening at once. I had emailed Dr. Price about, in one of the other districts that I work with, they do conferences first thing in the morning, so they start, I believe, at 10 a.m. And so you could get your conference done in the morning and maybe just go in a few hours late to work, as opposed to, trying to get to a 1 o'clock conference if you're working in Boston. I mean, you're going to go in for a few hours. You got to come. It's just a different. And again, this is nothing to. I mean, the teachers are wonderful about conferences and so on. But I'm just trying to think of what can we do with the schedule and how conferences are done and when they're all grouped together with all these different days.
I would only point out for the historical record that the conferences used to be the week of Thanksgiving, I believe, the Monday and Tuesday, and parents and teachers wanted to move that back because it was really close to the end of the trimester,
Yep.
and they wanted to be able to give kids an accurate report more kind of in a little after the middling piece.
Of the trimester, but this is just this is for elementary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I don't know. It's early. I don't know if we could, even push it back a week just to give people a break.
Well, just to piggyback onto that, pushing that possibly out to, let's say, the 24th or the 25th, that's a solid week that's kind of in between there. There's a little more momentum that can kind of happen. I just feel like I'm going to echo Mrs. Warren's comments here. You've got 4 days conceivably off that, and I don't know.
I can absolutely look at that.
I'm not sure why we picked the 17th and the 18th. I don't know
Probably
if
just
we.
because it was close to that this year, right?
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't know if this year's the later Labor Day screwed this
So
up or not.
let me, I think you guys can make a decision on the calendar, and I can adjust those days and take this into consideration. So absolutely, I will.
Okay.
I can bring it back to you.
Well, and certainly if you have a different perspective
Yeah.
too about when they are and if that is.
So I need to gain a perspective
Sure.
because I haven't had any conversations about
Well,
them. So
the part of how this whole calendar discussion got started was, some of those 6 numbers up there, right? Where, 6 snow days in 1 year, where it seemed like not only were we going way too close to June 30, but also we had the front of the year. Students didn't go to school until, October. No school took place until October. So that was sort of the combined effect that got us started on this path. It sounds like we still need to do some adjustment to that to get that
I wouldn't
right.
say no school.
Yeah, well,
continuous.
Right.
Yeah.
Days in a week.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the idea. I think what you're saying, Ms. Warren, makes a lot of sense. So let me just see if there's any reason why that can't be done. But I need to check that in.
The other thing I would add to the calendar discussion is that I think it's incumbent upon us, the school committee and the school department, to honor our commitment to try to solve this homework, assignment, whatever it is, policy. So if we're sitting here a year from now, having this discussion again, and we get negative feedback from parents that it didn't work, then we may have to rethink this, and say,
Yep.
if we can't make that stick. I mean, the policy is clear, we're not going to penalize, blah, blah, blah. But that has to work, and every teacher has to know that. So the boss is here, and we just depend upon her to get that message across and make sure everybody understands it. And it's not a like to do, ought to do. It's we will do this, period. That's a must do. So
I'll do my best.
I'm sure you will. So, but I think a year from now, if we don't get good feedback about that, then we'll have to rethink this.
I'm sorry, one question I have is, do we need to have 2 half-days for parent-teacher?
I actually, everyone looks to me. I'm not, I'd have to go talk about it with Dr. Price and think about when that came about, because they've had scheduled days for conferences for a long time. And off the top of my head, we did have night conferences at one point, but the night conferences weren't working out for parents. A lot of parents, work second shift, and there was and other parents. So they went to full-day conferences at one point, but then the full-day conferences got in the problem that you guys are in right now. We're adding a full day where it's conferences, and now that's extending the school year. And I think it's been half-days, Stan, with all your...
Quite a while.
I'd say at least 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And obviously, you need the time with our class sizes. If you need enough time, although our teachers do go above and beyond.
They do.
Yeah, I would be curious, if it could be back-to-back, though. I'm wondering from a teacher perspective, I'm sure they're prepping, for all of those on the 17th, right? The week before, and then, to come back on that exact next day and have another whole round of parents coming through. I would imagine that night of the 17th is pretty intense, trying to prepare.
I'm just thinking outside the box, and probably not a good idea to do so at a public meeting. But
we're not being recorded. It's fine.
One option would be to maybe do one on October 3rd, which is actually Rosh Hashanah.
That only impacts our K-5 students.
But it's something.
But what if we did, could you do the 12th?
It's some accommodation.
But could you do the 12th and the 19th?
Well, the 12th and the 19th.
Half days.
And then do your hour someplace else?
No, are you saying no school?
No, I'm saying,
for pre-K.
and I don't know if this would be seen as not good or good, so I don't know, but if you go along those lines, what if you did the 12th and the 19th for conferences? They stayed on Wednesdays.
The 3rd would only give us about 15 days of school.
Right. So that's a challenge.
What is that? I think it was 15.
You don't get
15 days before you meet with parents.
Okay.
Not much.
There's a lot going on, but any teacher will tell you.
That's a good.
The teachers are really prepared with typically some type of writing sample, how they're some of the common assessments and different things.
So let me look into that. I mean, it's all good ideas, so let me take it back. I'll bring it back to you in January in terms of the conferences, but.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess for the purpose of the vote that we need to take, we essentially just need to establish a start day.
And religious holidays.
And religious holidays or not. And the parent-teacher and the PD days are essentially at your discretion.
Correct.
So.
But I will bring you in the loop.
So one other thing I'd like to advocate for this calendar is I think if you look at the end of the school year, this calendar ends on June 22nd, and I think we would probably all agree that getting the days in earlier in the year as opposed to the 23rd, 26th, and 27th, when I think it'd be a real stretch to say that intense good learning time is happening the 23rd, the 26th, and the 27th, particularly as you barrel down on the 4th of July. So again, I think that this calendar, if we think about student learning and momentum in curriculum and teaching, I think this calendar has a lot to offer that's positive.
Yeah.
Though I still would love to see some more discussion about when the conferences are.
And just to state the other extreme, I mean, if we do find that after the October days are taken, if the winter is horrendous, we have other opportunities, right? We can shorten other vacations. Parisha thought we'd go to school on a Saturday. There are other alternatives that may be able to make up those days without us slipping into July. So I think finding a balanced starting calendar to work from makes sense. Our average snow load is 5 days, and I think we have to recognize and accept that. And I have full faith and confidence that Dr. Price can find a way to reinforce with staff and faculty that religious holidays really are, we have to find a way to make that a non-penalty day for the students and for the families. And I think some great ideas were presented in terms of addressing and mitigating some of the half days for pre-K 5 for parent-teacher as well. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and I do appreciate if you could let us know, regardless of which calendar is decided, how those are going to pan out, being sensitive to what we've heard. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense for me to present to you all of the all of the early releases and the half days. But once we get the calendar, then I can go through that.
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any other motions on modification to the proposal of what we have? Nope. So I'll call for a vote. All in favor accepting the school calendar 2016-2017 starting after Labor Day as presented, say aye.
With no religious holiday. With no religious holiday.
Well, that's what that calendar shows.
The first one.
Right, the one that we've been discussing. The 12th currently is shown as a PD day.
I want to be sure that it's clear in the minutes that it is, that religious holidays are not included.
Correct. This is the one that starts on the 6th of September and ends on the 22nd of June. That's what we're voting on.
Correct.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No abstentions? So it is. Thank you. Moving on to new business.
So I just want to set this up a little bit. I'm really excited to have Mike present this technology plan. He just to kind of give him some props and make him nervous before he starts. No pressure. The amazing Michael Grant, as I call him. Mike has done an excellent job really trying to come up with a multi-year plan for technology. And really worked incredibly hard with the town over the last month to really get clarity about all the different line items and budgets. So, Mike, thank you for all your work. And what I think you will see in the next 15, 20 minutes is a really exciting plan for the future of technology here in the North Andover Public Schools that makes a ton of sense, and we strongly believe we can actually operationalize even within our budget constraints.
Great. No pressure.
Yeah, no, this is it. It's always great to take any opportunity I can to highlight some of the great things that are happening in North Andover around technology. So it's the presentation I'm going to give tonight. If at any time you have any questions, feel free to stop me, but just be aware that I may answer that question at some point later in the presentation. The technology update I'm going to start with is the Chromebook update. So basically give you guys an overview of where we are with the Chromebooks and then move into the budget and where we see the district going. So recently we had an hour of code, and you may have heard about that from parents. Maybe your own children have experienced that. And it was a great opportunity. I went to a couple of schools during that week, and it was a great experience. You can see from the graph there is a 7-day active device versus date. That's from September 1st till last week or 2 weeks ago. And the graph shows all of our active Chromebooks, and the peak that you see there, like sometime towards the end of September, is the map testing that took place. The red line is actually an average, so that peak actually represents the maximum number of Chromebooks that we had at that given time. We actually have a little bit more than the red line currently, so after the map testing, you see there was a little dip, and I think people were just done with the Chromebooks for a little bit, and then you can see the uptick in the use of Chromebooks. So we're seeing them being used constantly on a regular basis in all the classrooms, and teachers are asking for more. During that hour of code, one of the classrooms, one of the 5th grades at Atkinson, the teacher asked the students for some feedback. So the kids wrote on note cards what they liked about the Chromebook. So a couple of I just put them up here. I was never really imaginative with writing, and the Chromebooks helped me think more creatively. The Chromebooks make math really easy to understand. And this one here was good. Makes math easier because if you get it wrong, it gives you multiple chances and tells you what you did so you can learn from your mistakes. So that's one of the math programs that they use on the Chromebooks, and if they get the problem wrong, it actually gives them another shot to do the problem. If they get it wrong again, it shows them what they did wrong and gives them a different problem to do. So it just gives them that positive, that feedback right away, and they're able to do this. And they can do it at home, too. And then the last one, Chromebooks are the best part of school. So I thought that one was fun. This is also the teacher, actually it'll clear up in a second. Teacher asked the students to go up to the board and write Chromebooks, like what they use Chromebooks for. And they just went up and did a quick chalkboard type thing. So hour of code is what they use Chromebooks for: research, fiction writing, math tests, writing assignments, Think Central, which is that math program, I believe, homework, reports, projects, and everything. So they were pretty excited about the Chromebooks. And I think parents have told me that a lot of the kids are asking them for Christmas. So they're going to be popular this year. This is an email we got from a teacher. Teacher wrote to us, giving us feedback on what a student wrote to her. So the teacher wrote, the note below came in over the weekend. I want you to know, thanks to the work you do getting us information on events, hour of code, and getting us more technology to use in our classroom is making a difference in our children's lives. After seeing this email, I asked my homeroom how many students happened to code over the weekend as a result of the class, and 7 had. The majority were girls, which is good to see considering the statistics of women going into sciences. But the student wrote to the teacher, in class on Friday we did the hour of code. I've programmed in the past, and you showing us the hour of code once again inspired me to program. In just one day I've programmed a game, and I plan on learning more every day. I just wanted to email you to say having the hour of code in your classroom has had an effect on me. Thank you for taking the time to read this. So this is student just wasn't solicited, just emailed the teacher to kind of let the teacher know they appreciated that.
Can you take 1 second and describe the hour of code?
The hour of code is a worldwide opportunity for students to learn how to program computers. So the Chromebooks, it's all web-based, so they can go on to code.org, they can go to Khan Academy, Google has a site too, there's a bunch of sites that are involved in this, Apple has some, and they're able to go online, and their focus is just if a kid can do an hour of code this week at any point, they just want kids to start learning how to code. We need to teach the next generation of students how to code, because that's really what's going to be driving a lot of the technology that we have. And if we don't have students that can learn how to code, they're just going to be users of the programs rather than the creators. And we need to be on the forefront of creating this stuff rather than just using it.
As somebody who got taught by their 5th grader what this was, I coded all weekend with her. It's basically dropping in puzzle pieces, and you actually develop like a game, and you have to code like what each actor does and how many seconds and all of that other stuff. And the cool thing is you can actually send it to your iPhone. So I have my game that I created that was extremely lame on my iPhone. She commented that I probably made the most lame game she'd ever seen. So, but it's just understanding how, and it's very simple. I mean, even I could figure it out.
Yeah, and
Not
it's,
well.
And it works nice with the young children because it is almost like puzzle pieces, but as the kids get older, they can actually change the blocks of puzzle, the object-oriented type code, into actual written code. So they can see, you can toggle between the two. So they're able to kind of see what the actual code looks like, as well as the object-oriented programming
It's
language.
really cool.
Sounds
Mike, for the data from the Chromebook usage, did you notice that was it fairly consistent across the schools, or?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, all of the Chromebooks are being used. There are some that are used more than others. Some teachers have taken them and won't let them go. But there are others that aren't used as often, but all of the Chromebooks are being used. As you can see there, it's just not at every single minute of every single day. So that's part of the balance, is making sure you don't oversaturate with devices, but you want to have enough that's available for students and teachers to use when they need it. Which kind of brings me to the vision of where we see this going. So the vision is basically has a number of components. So primarily we need to make sure that there is a solid network and infrastructure in place to be able to support this, which we currently have a very good, solid infrastructure. We also have to have fast, reliable internet access, which we're in that place right now. Appropriate number of student devices, academic classrooms that are model classrooms, so that they have presentation tools and the ability for teachers to be able to get what's on their laptop or computer, and students as well, up onto a display like this. Each teacher has their own laptop, and the support staff that can support students and teachers and the computers and devices, as well as a technology curriculum that can help kind of wrap all this together. So that's the vision moving forward.
Did we not get computers for the teacher? I thought.
They do.
They do.
Oh.
This is just the vision of what.
This is what we should have.
Okay, so that's already done.
A lot of that's in
Okay.
place. So a lot of that stuff has already been taken care of. A couple of the areas, and I'm just going to quickly go through these next slides because they're basically where we are right now. So network and internet, all the buildings are high-speed internet, high-speed wireless access. We've transitioned a lot of our internal servers to cloud-based services so that we're not managing and maintaining physical devices. Right. Increased our internet bandwidth from 50 to 750 currently, and that was over a period of a year and a half or so. Increased internal bandwidth speeds at the high school, the middle school, and Kittredge to 10 gigabits per second. Actually, that's 20 gigabits per second as of 2 days ago.
It's wireless or wired?
That's wired. So that's the wired connection, the fiber network between the buildings. And we fixed the 911 issue we've had for a number of years. And we've moved all of our phone system and PRIs and everything to Comcast. So we have one internet service provider, Comcast, the phones, and internet.
Can I ask just quickly where are the rest of the schools with their bandwidth?
So it's a long-term project. So the bandwidth, they're at 2 megabits per second per school. So they're 2 gigabits, sorry, 2 gigabits per second.
It's like 2 megs of dial-up.
Yeah, no, 2 gigabits per second. So they've 2 1 gigabit connections. So we've upgraded to 2 10 gigabit connections at those buildings. And then we're going to look at those other schools over the next, because they're expensive. It's an expensive upgrade.
You'll see.
So yeah, so it's a multi-year project. But that map on the right is actually as of a couple days ago, and you can see at the very bottom left, the large with all of the multi switches is the high school alone. So that high school has as much as probably the top half, which is the town or municipal side. So the high school is a very large infrastructure in and of itself. Student computers.
I just want to say, I went back over some of the things in the budget. going back to telephone, and in some of our schools have dropped to $1 or $3 for telephone. I'm not sure if that's related to that or not, but
Bad billing.
is that?
Say that again?
I mean, when we look at, for telephone, what we're spending on, I mean, some of the schools, like the Atkinson, is now $3.
Yeah, it's significantly decreased because we only have, I've eliminated a number of phone lines because we don't need all the phone lines that we previously had with Earthlink, and Earthlink was more expensive. So Comcast, we were able to reduce the number of lines, put a lot of those lines on digital lines, PRIs, and we were able to generate some cost savings on the phone piece. And at the high school, we need to eliminate a number of other lines. In the transition, we had to move everything over, and then we just eliminate them as we go.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, some of the bills are cheap, but they may go up a little bit over time, just kind of balancing themselves out. But it is a significant savings, I believe, over what we did with Earthlink. So student computers. So we use Google Apps for Education, which has been incredible. And we're using the Chromebooks right now. So teachers and students, so the vision is that we continue to use that. The students have enough devices and the teachers have the devices to be able to access all of the online resources. Tablets primarily are used in the early childhood and special education areas. So we've kind of given those tablets that we had in other buildings to that population of student because they use it in those classrooms for communication devices and special ed and things like that. So they're more appropriate for that level.
When you say early childhood, do you mean at the ECC?
ECC in kindergarten. So they use it for some of the teaching strategies gold, which is they were currently using. They were using last year and they're still using it this year.
So the tablets are being used by the children or by the teachers?
Children mostly. I mean, I want the kids to use those devices. So that's the goal is to get the devices in the kids' hands. The teachers have their own laptop. And then the kids can use the devices. So maintain it. The Mac and PC labs were appropriate. So like at the high school, we may have to have a PC lab or a Mac lab for graphic design. Or, I mean, I don't see replacing Macs that do graphic design with a Chromebook. But
and I know that there's some PC assets that drive, for example, the mechanical lathe that you're stuck on that platform. So.
Yep. So there are certain instances that we require that device. But Chromebooks, and this is from Forbes, have gone from 0 to a quarter of the education market in 2 years. So it's been a huge increase in a very short period of time. And just a couple days ago, they came out with statistics that Chromebooks have actually outpaced the sale of iPads in the education market. So they've quickly increased their, and with that increase also the resources available for Chromebooks. So there's a lot more out there for them. Model classroom. So the model classroom basically will contain a presentation device, so a ceiling-mounted projector, short throw, or flat panel, depending on the situation. And depends on the physical limitations of the classroom. I see using a short throw projector for most situations. It just seems to be the best. It's the easiest to mount. It's the most cost-effective to maintain over long term. Flat panels are coming down in price, but they're still a little bit more expensive. There were no bulbs to replace with flat panels, but it is also takes up wall space, and the short throws can actually use the existing whiteboards. So teachers can just turn it on or off and don't have to do much with changing around their room. And a document camera. So a document camera would give the teacher the ability to just take either a book or paper or kids' work and put it right under the document camera and project right up to the flat panel or the projector. But the nice part about a lot of these document cameras is that they are presentation devices and they are able to literally record video, audio, and snapshots of actually work. So teachers could actually do, like in math in high school, I could see a teacher doing a math problem out by hand, recording the audio, and then just uploading that video to their website or to Google Docs or sharing it with the class. So if a kid had, as the teacher is doing a lesson, they can do it under the document camera, record everything, and then save that video as a resource for students afterwards. So there are a lot of possibilities that those document cameras can be used for. The Chromecast is another, it's a wireless, it's what I'm doing wirelessly here. The images are are pixelating a little bit as we're doing this. I have a feeling, I just got this laptop last night, so it's a brand new one. So I'm not sure what's causing that. But that's a casting. So we have Chromecast in this room, and that's what we're using to project from this laptop.
Like Apple TV.
It's very similar to Apple TV. Those Chromecasts run about $35, so they're not that expensive. Teacher computers. So right now every teacher has their own laptop, MacBook Air for the most part. Some teachers are actually using Chromebooks. Teachers that do not need to access PowerTeacher Gradebook can use a Chromebook. Because right now we're using all Google Apps for Education, so it's all web-based, and they should be able to access everything from any device. Support staff. So this is where we really need to focus our attention. Without the support staff, we're not going to be able to do any of this in the classroom. So we do have IT support staff, and that staff really supports the hardware and the infrastructure. They do also have been doing teacher professional development and helping students in the classroom. But there's 4 of them, and there's 7 schools, 8 schools. There's 5 elementary, middle, high school, and the ECC, so they can't be everywhere. So we're looking at instructional support staff as a way to support teachers in the classroom, student instruction, and teacher professional development. So the vision is to have enough instructional support and the IT support to handle everything that we're throwing at them, because we've currently have over 750 Chromebooks, 350, 400 laptops for teachers, and all the other PC Mac labs that are in the district. And it's a lot to support. And if we're adding 500, 600 more laptops next year and the year after, then it just becomes even more. And the teachers are asking for the professional development. So how do we get there? So the staffing piece is the first thing we'll talk about. Then budget, student devices, and the model classroom is last. So staffing. So right now, this is going to pixelate a little bit, but the gray area, it's an org chart. The gray boxes are what we currently have. So at the very top is the school IT director, myself, and the municipal IT director, Chris, on the town side. And it branches out from there. So on the right-hand side is his IT support staff. So he has 2 that support the town. The network manager kind of sits between the 2. He manages the whole network for the town, the shared components. And then on the left is the information technology support staff that we have. So there are 4 of them currently. The one in green is currently a school employee that we're looking at. We're going to be moving to the consolidated budget area. So all 4 of those will be within the same budget allocations. The middle area, the pink and the blue, is the really exciting part. That, thanks to Dr. Price, we're looking at redefining what the librarians are at the elementary, middle, and high school. So we currently have 3 librarians, 1 at the elementary that's jumping between 5 elementary schools, 1 at the middle school, and 1 at the high school. We're looking at redefining their role as a library media specialist, which is a very common role for most librarians. They've all been, we've talked to all of them. They're all very excited about this change. And we've also are looking at hiring, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, the idea here is to first define this as kind of library and then also support teachers get into classrooms to use technology. I met with all 3 existing librarians. Many of them are doing some of that anyways, and they were very excited. The other thing that Mike, just to be clear, is we could actually move the library media specialists under Mike, and he would supervise and evaluate them. That is a very common structure in many school districts, that the library media specialists fall under IT.
As opposed to the building supervisor.
As having the building principals kind of one-off supervise the library, which would allow the folks on the IT support to work much more collaboratively, although they are doing it very informally with the library media specialists. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, as like I said, I would be previewing some of my budget proposals is to add one additional library media specialist at the elementary school. That would just be a straight-up school library media specialist. And then Kathleen Keenan and I, the librarian at the Stevens Memorial, are going to be putting forth a proposal for a 1.0 embedded town librarian, which would mean that somebody who's actually hired and supervised under Stevens Memorial would be half-time at Stevens and half-time within one of our schools. What that would mean is that each elementary school would have about a half of a librarian, which is a significant upgrade. We'd go from one library media specialist to 2.5 at the elementary level. I have been pretty clear with the principals that if we did this, the big schools, Franklin and Sargent, would have a library media specialist 3 days a week, and the smaller schools would have a library media specialist 2 days a week. So that will be part of the budget that I am going to present to you on January 7th. But that really increases the support, especially at the elementary schools. I think one librarian, as we saw in my entry survey, and just as frankly as common sense, between 5 elementary schools is very difficult. So this idea would be to increase library at the elementary schools and make sure that we redefine the job in a way that supports the integration of technology into the schools.
Do they need new certifications to do that?
Nope, they do not. And we would be hiring with an eye to making sure, but I will tell you that the person who did the vast majority of the hour of coding in our elementary schools is our librarian, Courtney Ahern. So she, when I met with all 3 current librarians, they were just totally excited about this. And as Stan, you saw my MassQ presentation, this is the vision of what a library is moving forward in any sense of innovative schools. That's what a library is.
Absolutely. Now, so Mr. Grant, explain I heard what you said, but I'm not sure I understood what you said. The green box is actually going to be a town resource.
Well, no, it's a school employee. She's currently paid for. She was originally an aide at the middle school that was a technology person.
Okay. So in terms of what happened is we increased the technology support and did it within the school budget. The rest of the employees are paid in the consolidated or shared services. So what we're doing is moving that position to the consolidated account. In the end, Mr. Lippert, that actually is an increase in our school budget, and it's a positive thing for the schools.
So which of on our side, on our part of the org chart, are some of those people paid for by the town in the consolidated?
All of them are in the consolidated.
Although the librarians are not.
That middle area, the pink and the blue, would be in the school budget. All the ones on the left, the 4 IT support staff, are all in the consolidated.
How about your salary?
I think it's a little bit of both.
His salary is between both.
Okay.
So everything in the gray at this point is currently paid by the school, by the consolidated. We would move one additional position into the consolidated. We would be adding the library media specialists within the school, except for the embedded librarian with Stevens.
Right.
Which would actually be in the consolidated.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this obviously has been cleared with Mr. Mailer.
Or you couldn't say it.
Correct.
Quick question for you. This, I assume the IT support staff has break fix and network management, password reset, things of that nature?
The IT support analysts?
Yes, on the far side?
On the far side. They can also manage the network piece. They do. Actually, one of them was working today on the Active Directory. We just synced our Active Directory with the town's, our Google Apps with the town's Google Apps account. So all of our resources will be shared as well. So that right now, if we go to type an email, prior to today, we couldn't see any of the town emails. Now we have access to all of the town email addresses. Okay. So that's part of. So yeah, so they can all do all of the network piece.
And how does that allocation of the number of people on staff compare based on the size of the network we're managing? Is that in line with industry, or are we light? Or
we're still light. I mean, we're still, as far as the number of devices, the network manager is really responsible for the network, so that's his primary role. We can do some. My staff can do some troubleshooting of the network, but when it gets to like the switches and the firewall and the all of the stuff in the towns within the town hall, that would all be taken care of by the network manager.
Okay, and are we aware of any problems with an SLA or issues where we weren't able to meet our commitment to the students with this organizational structure? No? Okay, good.
So but the gray boxes, those would be people like Kathy and
Yes.
Martha? Okay.
Yep,
Just so I'm clear.
exactly.
And I think your next slide gives a really good overview of kind of the vision here.
Yeah, it's going to pixelate again as it adjusts, but it's like a Venn diagram that will try to illustrate which responsibilities and roles that they all have. So like the school is the larger blue in the pink circle. The municipal is that green area. The network manager kind of sits in the middle of the blue and the green. The pink is the library media specialist that can do the staff professional development, technology integration. There is a database manager that I didn't talk about, but she is part of the technology team that is really falls under Greg. She does a lot of the curriculum and the state reporting, but she does do a lot within the technology department as well. So she is a part of that. And then I was looking at interns as a possibility down the road to see if we have projects here and there that we need. Northern Essex Community College, I reached out to them, and they have an intern program that they can provide. They have a technology program that can provide students that would work on network, database, and web development, which are 3 areas that we could use extra help if we had a project that we needed to work on. So it's just a way to kind of show where people fall and how their roles intertwine.
So can you maybe just talk a bit, I don't know, Mike or Dr. Price, about the library media specialists, and it's obviously an expanded role, so maybe just talk a little bit about what the vision is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the vision is it's going to look different at each grade level. So I'll start with elementary. So as we increase significantly this role at the elementary, one thing is it would be able to be kind of an opportunity. It would be one of the related arts that is at the elementary school, so that the teachers would actually have more additional time for collaboration. It's something we're working on with the school principals. But what I've said very clearly to the school principals is you could not schedule the librarians the full day that they're there, so that they would have time to get into classrooms. So if a teacher wanted to try to use a Chromebook for Lucy Calkins writing program, that they would have the library media specialist with them in the classroom the first time they bring in the 25 Chromebooks and open them up and pray, that they wouldn't be alone. So that would be the idea, is that they would be doing what would be traditionally library, although I think Ms. Ahern is showing that what is traditionally library is quite extensive, but then also be working with teachers. At the middle school, I think, frankly, it's already what's happening, because our current librarian at the middle school is a former IT person and is working very closely with DJ Sturdivant, for example. But it's really about making sure that the teachers feel supported, but then also that the library. And at the high school, our current librarian at the high school is actually teaching a technology class, and was very excited that kind of would become part of her job, but also supporting. So it's not just about changing kind of the dynamic, because I think they all are. We were talking about whether we would change the name of our libraries to something like Learning Commons or something like that, but the concept of the library, much more kind of technology integration into the library, but then also these folks making sure that teachers feel supported as they integrate out. So that's really the vision. Great.
All right, next, budget. So the budget, this slide here, once it starts pixelating, I think is a good explanation of the 3 major areas of the school budget for technology. The school budget right now is $399,753, so $399,000. The consolidated part is $330,000. The CIP is $100,000 for a total of $830,000. The CIP, that $100,000, the original intention of that was network maintenance and infrastructure, so on the school side. And you can see it was $100,000, and then in FY20 it jumped up to $200,000. We're looking at changing that to a different model, so that every year it's $100,000. And originally, like I said, it was for network and maintenance and infrastructure. And the town manager and Dr. Price had talked about what that would look like in this new model, and it's really going to be for IT needs as determined by the school. So if the school determines that they do need to upgrade some infrastructure, they could use it for that. If they needed to use it for the model classroom, if they wanted to buy devices with that 100,000. So there's a little more flexibility in that the town is going to be taking over a little bit more of the responsibility on the network and infrastructure piece, which is the next slide will kind of explain that a little bit better. So this one here, that green box in the middle is the shared consolidated. And what the shared consolidated is all of the money, all of the resources that the town pays for in the consolidated budget that is a shared resource. So for instance, the network manager's salary would be in there. The phone and the network infrastructure would be in there. Munis, the cost of Munis, the cost of internet access, antivirus, all of those resources are still paid for in the consolidated, but they're in that shared consolidated piece. It's very confusing, and it took me a while to kind of figure this out, but of that shared consolidated, that 6832 percentage is kind of the number that, it's not a hard and fast number, but it's just a rough. So we would benefit about $370,000 from that shared piece. So if you add that to the $830,000 that we have in our school budget, our total resources for IT are about $1.2 million, which is pretty good. If you look in that top right where it says additional $40,000 added, the town manager has added $40,000 additional money into that shared piece for the network infrastructure, which is why we were able to reallocate some of that CIP money to be more for school IT needs, as opposed to the network.
So I'm a little confused.
Yes.
On the previous slide, you showed school-only consolidated, 330, 790.
Yep.
And then on this next slide, you're showing the school part of the consolidated at 370.
That's an additional.
So there's basically three parts of the consolidated.
Mhm.
There's part, if you go back to that chart, okay?
Mhm.
Go back to the org chart. There's the part on the left that really is just school. So if you look at this, it's
Yep.
just school. There's the part on the right that's really just the municipality or the town, and then there's parts that's shared. So the first part was just the school only.
Okay.
Consolidated. And then the second one was when we include the shared services and our percentage of that shared services, it gives us a true number of what we're spending on technology. It's $1.2 million. So the second part of that, the shared, is just the stuff in the middle. So the network manager and overseeing the network. So it's not school only or town only, it's actually truly shared stuff. And we need to take into account, when you really look at what are you spending on IT, you need to take into account what we're saying, 68% of those shared services. We go back, we account for all of it on the left, we're accounting for all of this,
Yeah.
we're only accounting for 68% of this.
In a few more slides, I'll have a little bit more explanation that will help clarify that. And it'll become a little bit more clear in one of the next slides.
Okay.
So that shared consolidated piece, as Dr. Price was saying, is that stuff in the middle that's not school only, it's not town only, but it's the stuff that's in that consolidated, which is the model that that's the true model of the consolidated piece. So that part we're sharing, which is the munis, which the school uses, the municipal side uses, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the first slide that we're going to look at here is the school budget piece. And this is the $399,000 that's school only. This is the school budget, not consolidated.
Okay.
And of that $399,000, $227,000, the big chunk of it is equipment, $144,000 is salaries. The equipment piece, of that $227,000, $85,000 is, we have one more payment on the lease for the teacher MacBook Airs that we purchased.
Okay.
And I've set aside $10,000 to $15,000 for replacement costs for some teacher devices, but there's $128,000 that we've allocated for student devices. Salaries are the salaries on the school side, so.
I'm sorry, in that 227, 340 you've allocated, how much for
We'll
students?
go, on the next slide.
The
we'll
next
go
slide,
on
we'll tell you that.
Okay.
Software licensing, that's like for our wireless, our Wi-Fi, and then there's some materials and supplies line item that just for stuff like batteries and things that we need to replace things with. The next slide, so student devices, we've allocated $128,000 for student devices.
Which is up from 75 last year. This is why we're putting us through this, so you can understand how we
Yep.
were able to really increase this.
So 128 will get us between 5 and 640 Chromebooks, depending on the configuration. So if you need carts for every single one of them, you're getting about 500 Chromebooks, which would translate to about 17 carts that would be used throughout the district, K through 12.
What would be any thought on the apportionment of how the devices would be handed out?
Say that again?
No.
Okay.
So
Good.
how we would apportion them?
Right. It would be very similar to what we did the last time.
Okay.
Based on, like, the high school and the middle school didn't get all that much from the last. So I would give them some, so they would get some, and then we would distribute the rest for the elementary. So the elementary, the 75,000 that was appropriated by you guys last year, we would try to maintain that for the elementary school as well, so that, and then the remaining would be distributed between the middle and the high school. And that's just a rough.
Throwing more Chromebooks into the middle school Shark Tank, I don't know, that might be really dangerous.
The middle school is the place that we actually need them more than anything.
To keep the sharks under control.
The sixth grade teams right now they're fighting over the resources, from what I've heard.
They are. They keep asking for more and more. And actually, you came to me and added, what about the middle school? Does the middle school get any?
And my daughter can attest to it.
Yeah. So yes, so we are looking at all the schools, not just the elementary. So it would be, but with that 128,000, we could get between 5 and 640, depending.
And the other thing that's amazing about this is we can track every Chromebook and how often it is used. So one of the things we will use is usage.
Right. Yep. When it was last logged into and all that, so we can make sure that they're all being used.
Yep.
So it's nice. All right, so this is the consolidated budget slide. So the school-related expenses within this consolidated. So this is the 330,000. As you can see, the vast majority of that money is salaries, which are the IT support analysts. So Kathy, Martha, Paul. So that support staff. Licensing costs. So software licensing, which are school-related. So Power School comes out of here. School Messenger comes out of here. Health Master. All of those licensing for software services come out of this. Contract services, that 5,000 is our E-rate consultant, so that comes out of the consolidated. And then a small amount for equipment replacement, so replacing, again, batteries. And so we've kind of allocated some money in there just to update some basic things. But you can see the biggest amount is the salaries, and that's the consolidated budget. So that's the school consolidated. And then the CIP, we've looked at a ratio of trying to figure out how we can support the model classroom initiative. So the model classroom, we would try to dedicate about $60,000 to that, and $40,000 for edge network enhancements. So like upgrading some of the elementary schools that you talked about, like when we said we upgraded the high school and the middle school to 10 gigs, so using that money to then look at upgrading some of the other elementary schools or replacing. So some of the things that we have to enhance on the school side, we would use some of the CIP budget. The CIP, last year we used almost all of this for the high school and the middle school. But I don't think we're going to need as much for the other elementary schools, because those two schools were huge as far as costs and what work needed to be done. But also we also get 40% E-rate reimbursement on some of the equipment that we purchase, which we would then hold in reserve for any other things that we might need to come up, whether it's additional model classroom or whatever. So we can't really rely on the E-rate money until we decide how that gets spent. Any questions on the CIP?
So the good thing is by freeing up, by us moving more of the network support into that shared consolidated, we actually get to free up some of the CIP to just support stuff in our schools, which has not been, that's why we spent some time on the shared consolidated, is it frees up a significant amount of money for us to use for student devices, classroom level devices. So it's really bringing a significant amount of additional money with really no change in budget to our technology.
So, and I assume you're going to tell us sort of what a model classroom costs.
Stan, you're so good. Here we go.
Before we transition there, I think earlier you told us that internet access into some of the buildings is not where we want to be. So is that the edge device or the edge
Yes.
enhancements you're talking about?
Yep.
So would the wireless within the building be adequate, or does that also have to get
The
evaluated?
wireless in the building is the same as every other building. So the wireless within the building is fine. It's just the switches at each of the, and 2 gigs is plenty for pretty much where we are right now. It's just that when they start to age out, when those edge switches start to get to the point where they need to be replaced, we could start looking at the 10 gig capacity, which is what the E-rate will reimburse us at. So they won't reimburse us with the 2 gig or 1 gig switches. They're looking at pushing everybody to that next level. So they're encouraging everybody to do the 10 gig, which is why we did the high school and the middle school, because those are the 2 biggest users right now.
Is there any consideration to the equipment room, cooling and air handling and security, or has that already been dealt with?
The rooms are fine. There's no issues. The high school's already been taken care of as far as cooling. The middle school, and actually with removing a lot of the servers that we had in those rooms, it's taken the load off of the air conditioning need in a lot of those spaces.
Well, I'm less worried about the bigger buildings like the high school and middle. I'm more concerned about the smaller buildings that I thought were switches over sinks and some things that might not be ideal.
We've gone through and cleaned up a lot of that over the past year and a half or so. So they're not as bad a shape as they were when we first started. Like some of the pictures I may have showed you in the past with the wires and stuff all over the place. So we've cleaned up a lot of that and made sure that those rooms are adequate.
And that responsibility very much falls within the person hired to be the network manager. That is his job, is to really be supporting our networks in the schools and in the town. That really is not Mike's job. That is.
No, I appreciate that. I'm concerned that there may be prioritization of infrastructure issues that we're just blind to.
Yeah, no, the infrastructure is actually in very good shape.
Okay.
They're doing a lot of work, like in the town with the fiber network, and they just added additional fiber to the tower, the water tower, and the fire station, the new fire station, Stevens Estate. So they're doing a lot of the infrastructure piece.
How have you found the relationship with the new town IT manager?
Excellent. It's incredible. Just we work well together. He's a Google. Comes from a town that's addict. So when he came here, we were already in the middle of it, and he was amazed at how quickly we moved in that direction and how much we're using it and what we're using it for. So
he's moved into Gmail, right?
He's what?
He's moved them to Gmail.
Yep. Not yet. I think in a month or so they're going to be making that jump.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's very good relationship, and the network manager as well is excellent. He does an incredible job. And then lastly, the model classroom. So to answer your question, Stan, the model classroom, these are preliminary costs. They're not hard and fast, but they're actually a fairly good estimate. They're based on real numbers. They're based on inventories that were taken in every classroom during the maybe about a month ago. And I got some quotes from vendors on the cost for installation. And based on all those numbers, this is some of the. It could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, depending on the physical situation of each room. But this is the general cost for the projectors, the wireless, and the cameras, and any electrical costs related to installing the devices, and then the total.
Would this cover all classrooms?
Yes. So the reason that is different is that we are taking stock of what is already there. Our plan is not to rip out anything that is already there. So, for instance, you'll look at the Kittredge Elementary School. The PTO did a pretty significant fundraiser a number of years ago and installed projectors, interactive whiteboards in every classroom, so that all they would need to do is to upgrade, is to get the document cameras and the casting device. Other schools have, if you look at the middle school has very few mounted projectors, that if they have the projectors, they're on carts, which is not the greatest model. So you'll see that they actually have the largest need. So what we did is say, we went into every classroom. Mike, you can talk about the process that you came to for this.
Yeah, each of the IT support staff went into every classroom, did an inventory of every room, so we have a big spreadsheet of what's there. And based on those numbers, if there was nothing in the room, no projector, nothing, then we put a short throw wall-mounted projector. If they had a fairly new projector that was already purchased, we tried to price out a ceiling-mounted projector and reuse what we already had. After looking at some other numbers, it may make more sense to not ceiling mount, because the mounting in the ceiling can actually be more costly because you've got longer runs. And the cabling might be more expensive, so it kind of washes out. So it may make more sense to just take the existing projector that's still working and move it to like a K1-2 class, and then put a short throw, and then over a couple year period, then we can start use what we already have in one of the lower grades, and then install the short throws, and then the following year work down to the lower grades.
So, obviously, we don't have $243,000 to do this. So over the last few months, I've been working with the PTO co-presidents to talk about how we might get to this in a collaborative way. And what we've done is actually send, with breakdowns of every K-2, 3 to 5 classrooms, we've sent actually every grade, we've sent to the PTO co-presidents with the principal and the IT support, so that they know specifically what we would need to install in each classroom. And we had a very good meeting this morning with all the PTO co-presidents, and the PTO co-presidents at every school have committed to working with us to collaboratively try to fundraise to get where we need to get. That we would commit some dollars, and they would try to get as much as they could through their PTOs and through some collaboration around a joint mailer, to try to raise enough money at their PTOs, through their PTOs, to get as close as they could. The plan is actually to have this over a 2-year plan, so that we wouldn't be funding this. We have committed from the school side to cover the electrical costs. One of the hopes is that with the new maintenance position that would be going in as part of the new custodial contract, that we might be able to cover some of those electrical costs in-house if we are able to hire an electrician, so that those numbers might be lower in terms of actual dollars for us. But the goal would be to do all 3 to 5 classrooms by this September, for instance, at the elementary, and then to do K2 the following September. We've spoken with the middle school, and the middle school principal, and the middle school PTAC, and we would probably pick subject areas to do. So, for instance, and this is no commitment, we might do science and social studies next year, and math and ELA the following year, so that every kid would actually be touched in terms of the model classroom in at least some of their subject areas, and would allow for collaboration across subject. And then at the high school, the number is not as big, because when we built the new high school, we had installed projectors. So much of what we have to do is just, and the high school PTO feels like that is a manageable number for the high school. So we are all committed to trying to get to this number. The PTOs are very clear that if they are unable to raise money, this is looking like a 4 to 5 year project. If we are able to work collaboratively, we're looking at a 2-year project. And you know, the first part of this was getting over the inequities that exist. And understanding that we do not have equal technology across the district. So my first was, we've shared this. Everyone has seen this slide. It's not that they don't know where there are inequities. And we're really committed to trying to close those inequities. And you know, I think the first part of that step is just acknowledging that they are there. And how we've gotten there, there's lots of stories, but my kind of view has been that's where we're at, so let's move forward. And then the other thing I would say is, you know, each school is going to have different abilities to raise the money, and we're kind of at a point where we're like, we're all going to do our best, and we will use the money that we've allocated in the CIP to close the gaps where we need to. It was very clear this morning with the PTOs that I think the place we're going to have to probably help close the gap the most is at the middle school. And, you know, the great thing is that every kid in the North Andover Public Schools, or every family, benefits from that middle school. So even if that feels like, well, we're giving a little bit more to the middle school, it's kind of we're all there. So very collaborative. Mike and I met with them for almost 2 hours this morning. All of this has been transparently communicated to them. This entire presentation was sent to them. And I think, you know, we don't quite know if we're going to be able to raise the money, but everybody, as you know, as affirmatively said, they're in to try to do this in a collaborative way.
At least they all have very clear targets.
They all have very clear targets and understand. And the collaboration would be, that, Mike would oversee the installation, so it takes a lot of what the PTOs have had to do in the past around finding installers. It's just, and then the idea would be they would raise money, donate it to us, and that's how we would go about getting this done.
So can you explain the collaborative piece a little bit more? Because, I mean, I look at the elementary districts, and certainly there's our schools, there's a huge difference between the different schools.
Yep.
But, I look at particularly the two largest ones, Sargent and Atkinson. Those are huge numbers.
Yep.
And particularly for Atkinson, which is a much smaller school. What is the expectation for them?
Yeah, so I would just say
And
that,
for- I guess for
so we're
Sargent.
not setting out what the expectation is. We're saying, and people have asked me, like, what is the expectation? The expectation is we're going to do the best we can. And, we're going to try to make the target, and we're all going to assume that we're working hard, and if we don't meet it, then we will adjust. And and the other reality of the situation is if the number needs to be north of $60,000 in the model classroom, then we will buy fewer Chromebooks. And if the number is south of $60,000, we will buy more Chromebooks. And so everyone understands the math, and so the commitment of the PTOs is to try to hit the number because they'd like us to buy more Chromebooks for their kids. I mean, I would say, and you talk about the two largest.
In terms of budget.
Yeah. I think, Sargent, I've spent a lot of time with their PTO and members of their PTO. They feel like they can do this if they have a really thoughtful plan. Atkinson was all in today, too. They feel like they can do this. I've met with the Thompson PTO. I spent a bunch of time with them last week. And Franklin is also, I've met with all the PTOs. We've talked about this. The collaborative part that we're thinking about is a joint letter from the principals, myself, Mike, and all the PTO co-presidents that would go to the entire district explaining our approach to this and asking them to donate to their PTO to support it so that it would be a direct ask from all of us so that it wouldn't be individual PTOs going out. They would then follow up with this is what it looks like at our school. And, many of the PTOs, and I will just speak for Sargent, they've been wanting to integrate more technology and wanted to be supportive, and they have been waiting for a plan. So they're actually quite excited that there is now a plan that feels consistent and understanding. I don't want to speak for them, but that's what they've communicated, and frankly, that's what most of the PTOs have communicated. So, it's about working together. It's about meeting on a monthly basis. It's about drafting letters together. It's about seeing where we get. It's about if we aren't as successful as we could be in a direct mail, maybe doing a town-wide fundraiser in the fall where all the PTOs work together. So it's really about rolling up our sleeves together. And the feeling this morning was, we're not quite sure where we're going to go, but let's all roll up our sleeves together and let's not make this what I have and what you don't have. It's about what do we have.
Anyway, I think this is fantastic that we can see sort of where we're going and what we need to have happen at the different schools to get there. So I really appreciate this information.
If we, say, hit a home run and got the $248,400, could we just compress that schedule and do it?
Yeah, so we talked about that this morning a bit. And in some respects, like for instance, if we were able to do that at the middle school, I would say go for it. One of the things that our principals are giving us some feedback on is that it might make sense to have 3 through 5 only at the elementary so that we can support that. Those teachers get the library media specialists in there and that the K-2 teachers can see that and model that, and then a 2-year implementation might actually work better curricularly, pedagogically, culturally. The middle school is clamoring for the technology. The teachers are frankly fighting over it at this point. And so if we were able to do all the middle school in 1 year, I would be great. Probably the same with the high school, because again, the high school has a much more of an integrated technology approach to begin with. Yep. So I think we have to say we need to be sensitive to not doing this in a way that's going to negatively impact use of technology. So we've thought about that.
And then if we go that route, we'll have the capacity to give the teachers the professional development support they need to utilize these resources.
And as Mike said, if we do 3, let's just use elementary as an example. If we do this in 3 to 5 classrooms, if we have a projector that's on a cart, we'll move it to the K-1-2 for next year so that they'll get some. So the idea here is we're not ripping out a darn thing. Like, we are not in a place in the North Andover Public Schools where we are going to get rid of any assets we have. We would just reallocate those assets. And then the thing is, the third year of this plan would be to actually try to outfit all the related art classroom spaces, because we don't even have, this is just core academic classrooms. So again, if we had additional stuff, we could put, a projector on a cart in an art room, or, so,
And I assume that was part of the inventory.
yes, it was, but we're also trying to make the numbers manageable. We also, I think Mike has done an excellent job of defining the model classroom at a basic level. We haven't put things in like speakers or CD players, and PTOs, if teachers would want that, could also support that if they happen to raise additional money. But we kept this as basic based on what other districts were doing, what our experiences are of what we think is like bricks and mortar in a classroom.
Right.
If I could just add one other thing, the thing with the document cameras, if we move the projectors that were in the, say, 3, 4, and 5 to the K1, 2, the document cameras are very inexpensive.
Very.
You could actually purchase the document cameras for K1 and 2 to use with the projectors that they will get. So they could start using that without having the mounted projector that's a little bit more costly. The mounted projectors are the one, it's the biggest cost, and that's what's adding up to that big chunk.
So have we considered thinking a different way about the 128K for student devices to help level some of our big issues, especially in middle school?
Yeah, so that 128,000 has been allocated for student devices, but as Dr. Price said, if we find that we need to use some of that money to maybe use some of it for the model classroom, we can look at allocating that differently. It all depends on how the spring goes and if there's fundraising, what we can get done. There's a lot of there's flexibility kind of built into the plan to be able to respond to that.
I would say we are in desperate need of additional student devices in the district also, so the hope is to be able to do both. But as Mike said, we would go one way or the other based on kind of what seems to be the most pressing.
And have we looked at mitigating the demand for student devices by accelerating a BYOD program?
The BYOD is a difficult thing to manage, just because you accelerate the BYOD program, so you have kids bringing in all of these devices. We still have just 4 IT support staff, like one person at the high school. So you have kids bringing in multiple devices, with whether it's an iPad or a phone, connecting, and it could work, but I've just heard and talking to other IT directors that BYOD is not always the best way to go.
I'm just looking at it as a way to
Many
mitigate.
districts are backing away from that, I will tell you.
Yeah, I would say from this presentation that BYOD here is dead.
But in those districts that is failing, have they already moved to a cloud-based infrastructure and a cloud-based or internet-based teaching model, which I can imagine that would be a big deal. But if you can get connectivity and get out to the internet,
I
you're
think
good.
difficulty in managing, and it's sort of not an infinite number, but a large number of devices, is the big limitation in the BYOD model. So I don't think, there's nothing about it that seems to offer an effective alternative other than what would seem to be some small cost savings, but that would be it. So I think at the rate we're going, we're going to have Chromebooks in everybody's hands long before we would effectively implement a BYOD program.
But I think I hear what you're saying. I know you've studied this in great detail. I respect that. What I'm concerned about is Kittredge is showing 0, but we all know that the whiteboards or the smart boards don't live forever, and many of them were replaced in the last 3 years, if I recall.
So we aren't planning, if you think about the model classroom, we're purposely not putting in a smart board or an interactive whiteboard. We do not think that that is the best use of dollars.
But that's the dominant device in Kittredge, is it?
Yeah.
Correct.
So when they go out, we would replace them with projectors.
Understood. So what's the usable life of that technology?
Well, the current projectors in the high school, many have been there for 12 years,
Yes.
So a lot of them.
and we're not replacing them.
So the projectors can last quite a while. You replace bulbs. The bulbs for some of the projectors at the high school can run 150,
and not cheap.
a couple $100. The newer projectors, the short throws, you can get them, the bulbs are like $85. So the replacement bulb costs for the projectors are cheaper. And as long as you get a decent projector, high quality products, then they're going to last a while. They say the lifespan is 5 or 6 years for a projector, but that's the lifespan of the ones that are at the high school that are 12 years old. So
But I would challenge that that's because they haven't been used, right? They haven't been adopted, and they're not.
the ones at the
part
high
of-
school, I think, are used like a lot. Like,
We've seen hours on the.
Oh,
oh
yeah.
God, yeah.
We use quite a bit since 2004 on. I would just add, because Mike and I talk quite a bit about this, the way the curriculum connects with this, but meeting monthly with my curriculum group of other assistant superintendents locally, it's really been fascinating. I think it ties to Mike's Forbes quote. The districts that have gone iPad and the districts that have gone the BYOD, and they were hot and heavy, have all backed off. Because it's not working, it's not sustainable. It's a nightmare to manage network-wise, and then the cost of the actual device is just so high that most districts have now rethought that. And as Mike pointed out earlier in one of his presentations, just with all the Google suite, I like to call it, everything that's free, that's really it's locally here on the North Shore. That's the way that most districts are heading.
And I would say that the biggest complication of the BYOD that I've seen beyond what you've talked about is we have an economically diverse community. So trying to figure out how to do that. We do not have every kid who can afford one of these.
Right.
And so that becomes very complex. If you remember a few years, Natick had a very challenging time managing that. I would say, Brian, that when I left this morning with the PTO co-presidents, we're not guaranteeing this is going to happen. And I think we're going to be able to raise this money working with school resources to get this done and to be able to buy the Chromebooks. I think we're about 2 years away. I mean, if you think about the vision, in 2 years we'd have an additional 1,000 Chromebooks in our schools, and we would have all classrooms, core academic classrooms, outfitted with the technology that they need. I think that's a very realistic, doable goal, and I think we will be able to get the funds to do it.
One of the questions that I would ask is, while this all seems really great, and it's predicated on the dramatic crash in prices of Chromebooks, I mean, a lot of this is driven by free software and cheap Chromebooks.
Correct.
Are Chromebooks the netbooks of today, and they're going to go the way of netbooks? Because, 5 years ago, Mr. Gilling was still a principal, and we got all excited about netbooks, and they're cheap, and we can buy a bunch of them.
We were excited about any technology that was.
I know. We went out, and that sort of quietly just disappeared. I mean, we stopped
I
doing
think the
it.
difference is, I think now with it, we have an educator that's heading up our IT department, rather than at the time, we had a non-educator that was making a lot of those decisions with the SFSF money.
Yep.
And that was very much in favor of a particular platform and device, without taking into consideration not necessarily the complete needs of the teachers and/or the kids or the curriculum. And I think that's probably the.
Yeah, I'm good with all that. I just don't want the marketplace to pull the rug out from under you, Mike, and say, Chromebooks, we're not into that anymore.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. The way that the netbooks happen. The netbooks were undersized, underpowered, trying to run Microsoft, and it just couldn't handle those computers weren't designed to handle that. These are designed to be lightweight, very easy to manage. The management piece on the other netbooks was a nightmare as well. So updating and maintaining these require almost zero maintenance and updating, zero viruses. There's no virus protection software. You don't need to have all of that bloated software installed on them in order to make them usable. When you pass these out into a classroom and the teacher opens them up, within 5 minutes, every kid is already logged into their account and is working. Right. Whereas even the minute the others were were installed in the classroom, they took forever to turn on, took forever to get them logged in. They were all networked into the network. The network was slow. It wasn't designed and built to be successful. It was a failure to begin with.
And some weren't even the netbooks. I mean, they did have some quality at the time, but we didn't have the infrastructure at the time. Right.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just, again, to Mr. Gross's point, I'm concerned about, shifts in technology.
Right.
And this plan is great today, but 2 years from now, something might change, and we might.
And we'll have to change.
Yeah, I understand.
But I think that it's well thought out. I think we are future-proof in the way that we're moving off of servers in the basement. And I think as long as you stay up with
Servers in the
internet
basement.
connectivity and browser technology,
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. How could this possibly fail, right?
But the good thing is we've built into the budget, I mean, the thing that I'm most excited about is we built into the budget approximately $230,000 for equipment replacement every year. That's exciting, teacher and student. And we've also built into the budget $100,000 to the CIP that can augment that. So we're looking at about, we're looking at about $350,000, $340,000 a year that can adapt to these changes, which we really have not had that level of resources, and that's through so that's exciting. I mean, $340,000, it's going to grow at whatever percentage we grow, is going to be enough that if Chromebooks all of a sudden go off the planet, then over 3 years we'll have,
something else.
Something else. But we're not in a place where we're trying to find money to do this every year.
Right.
We have built into our budget, working collaborative with the town, and the allocation that you guys created last year, and Mike's complex understanding of all the budgets, that we now know how we can be nimble rather than be reactive.
Well, just for me, I would say this is, I was thinking back about the presentation you gave us when was it, like May or June last year, kind of as part of SIPs or something, and a lot of the similar information, but it's sort of not a very upbeat presentation. It's sort of like, well, we have problems and rats nest back room deals, and this is a totally different presentation. This has a totally different feel to it. This is like, we can do this. We can do this.
So, Officer, was there?
Well, I just wanted to add one thing. I think it's also been a tremendous benefit for us, for our district, that we now have an extremely supportive superintendent for technology. I think that's a gigantic change.
Absolutely.
So I think that's having a very positive effect on moving this stuff forward rapidly.
Well, I've seen how it can impact teaching and learning. And so that's why I'm so supportive of it.
That's good.
Having moved an entire building out of the Stone Age into the future over one summer, and watching the dramatic change that meant for kids learning and teachers teaching, I just know the power of a well-constructed technology plan and how it can support teachers and kids in their work.
And this is the kind of plan we really always needed, which is a very practical plan. We don't need a theoretical plan. This is just very...
Ms. Warren?
So in the plan and in the next few years, where or when do you see the curriculum piece coming in? When will that be developed?
Yeah, so that's really part of the library media specialist too, is them helping us develop the curriculum. And I think that that's a really good question in terms of how we get there. We just don't have the devices quite yet, but I would see that kind of a year out from now, that we'd be sitting here a year from now and I'd have a really thoughtful plan about that. But at this point, we have getting an additional library media specialist on. We'd be able to develop that. I also do know that Google is actually trying to figure out that side of the equation, and there might be some opportunities for us to work with them to think about that, as they've done with the coding. There might be a corollary to kind of actually a really comprehensive K-12 curriculum through districts. And I've actually spent some time talking to the head of Google Cambridge about that.
So and I think that's super exciting. So that would be that we would have a curriculum a year from now, or that we've started developing?
No, we would not have a curriculum a year from now.
So even like spiraling of skills, nothing?
Yes, so the reality of the situation is that we don't have a consistent curriculum for almost anything in our elementary schools. And as you will see when I put my budget forward, although I think technology is really important, I think we need to start in some other places, and I need to be thoughtful about where we're going to start. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't have a curriculum from the library media specialist working with kids and doing that within the special of the library, but integrating that into the kindergarten, first, second, third grade classroom. I would like to start with writing.
So I totally agree, and I'm thrilled to support reading and writing. I think the one thing that I still would love to see is, particularly in grades 3, 4, and 5, if we're putting devices into the classrooms and we're asking teachers to utilize them, I think that there really needs to be something, even very basic, from like typing to just learning how to use Google Docs, but making some sort of consistent expectation in those first few grades to help them get to the points at the middle school. They are more independent. They are able to just sort of roll into that, as opposed to having, I think there's, just from the technology that we're seeing in the different school buildings, probably a huge disparity in what they're coming in with versus what they don't know. So I get there's a ton, there's so many needs, but I would really strongly encourage there be something for those grades.
Well, it's different. What you're talking about is expectations on skills. That's something I think we feel confident we can do through the library media specialists around a really well thought out curriculum around computers and coding and all of that. That's not as quick.
Sure, great. So that's like a two-step.
Those are two, to me, I was thinking curriculum, but in terms of expectations on skills, again, that's why I want to increase the technology support personnel at the different schools.
When you talk, so to back a question again about the library media specialist, one of the things we've lamented is the fact that, with the loss of librarians, we lost what librarians really did, which is not check out books, but teach research skills and all of that. I'm assuming that will be a major component of what these people will be.
And also some computer skills. I mean, that would be the idea. Is that's why how you redefine that.
Yeah. Okay.
Very exciting.
My only concern, and I am very appreciative of the fact that the PTOs are on board and excited about this, and it is extremely exciting. The conversation has been awesome. I am just worried about looking at, the fundraising and the support that we're going to have to financially pull from people in town. And I don't want to minimize, I'm going to be wrong on my number here, but, the sergeant over the past 3 years has raised at least $100,000 in terms of, the playground. Franklin has done that. I mean, there are a significant number of families who have already contributed significant dollars to our schools, and we're now looking at another. And I understand that part's going to come from our budget as well, but another basically $250,000.
So I will say that not all of this has to be raised. A number of the PTOs actually have some funds already available that they would leverage for this, so that we're not looking at having to raise the whole amount. I'm just going to tell you that having talked with PTOs, having looked at their budgets, some of them already have funds available, so they're not starting at zero.
Yeah. Okay. And I assume someone's looking to see if those funds are matchable to grants or other things.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at all that. But there's no doubt, Andrew, that we're going to have to raise and ask families for more money. And we have to be thoughtful about that and how we do it and when we do it. And if we don't, then we can go over the 4-year plan. I think for many families, they'd like to add some amount of money so that we can accelerate this a little bit.
Yeah, I too have heard feedback that there's fundraising fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah, we respect that.
Well, that is a product of the fact that we are the 29th lowest spending community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I think the one positive thing, though, and I agree, it's a big number, but I think what is good about this particular initiative is that it's something very specific and tangible, so that you know what you're giving to. And I think, that I remember, I think it was the last meeting when we had from the high school, the science, they raised the money through the GoFundMe. I think that when there is something very tangible and specific and clear and a short-term goal of, even if it's a couple years, hopefully that will be more enticing to want to participate and see the changes happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. Directed funding is much easier than general.
But there's no doubt that there's fundraising fatigue.
So great. The only last question I have, and I'd like to move on if that's okay. Will we get access to summary and status? So, for example, last year there were pilots that were proposed. Was there any feedback or readout from those? Are we planning to do any new pilots this year? Is it possible to get a breakdown of Chromebook use by school and by grade, things of that nature? That obviously this is a great summary and it's definitely going in the right direction, but I would love to take a look at some of the minutia just to get an insight for where we are and how far we've moved the needle.
So you're looking at data on Chromebook usage, any pilot programs, things like that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think the framework of the technology plan that was presented was very insightful, and I'm just wondering if we abandoned that, or can we get a readout of here's what we thought we were going to do, and this is what worked and what we're moving forward with. And then, here's how we move the needle with what we had as base performance. Because I think this is going to be helpful as we communicate out the progress we have made, in addition to what gaps we still have to close.
Yeah, the technology plan hasn't been abandoned. It's just, I think as anything, you have to adjust over time and given whatever circumstances come along. So I can go back through there and just look at what we were planning on doing and give you an update on any of that.
I'm not looking for busy work, but I think it completes the conversation of this is what has been, this is what we've done, and this is where we are, and now this is our future. So I think that would be helpful. Great. If there's no other comments, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. Great job.
So I would just like to thank Dr. Price, though, and your team for this initiative, the new vision, and certainly to the PTOs, who have, I think, always been incredibly supportive of what we're doing and where we're going. And I think, this thinking outside the box and looking for new ways to make this happen and make it happen in a real and, time-sensitive way. So I thank you.
It's incredibly collaborative. And
And I would say, much to the amazing Mr. Grant's credit, I was a little skeptical when we started going all in on the Google thing, and now he looks like the genius of the Western world. So I'm just like right behind him. Yeah, I was with that guy. I was on his page right there. Yeah. So this is all looking really good. Yeah.
But we have the money to adapt.
Yeah.
Yes. Texas Instruments coming back.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you very much.
I'd like to move on to our last new business item, which is a discussion of MCAS versus park testing in 2016.
I'm going to turn it over to Gilly.
Okay, so just a quick update on November 17th. DEAS, the Board of Education, and their particular board voted 8-3 to transition to a next generation MCAS exam that would be given for the first time in 2017. And that exam would be comprised of both park-like items and MCAS items as well. And it will be specifically developed by Massachusetts as Massachusetts' own test. And that would be, as I said, 2017. So what does that mean for us? That means that us being an MCAS district last year, that we'll be an MCAS district again this spring. And the MCAS exam this spring will be augmented with a limited number of park items as well, so that they can try to make some statewide comparisons between the two. But the state really has a big task in front of them because they are putting together an RFP now to put out to bid for help with the creation of the 2017 exam, which will be Massachusetts' own. And like I said, right now we're looking at it's roughly around 50-50 of the schools who took park last year are taking park again, obviously, and the MCAS are taking the MCAS. And as I was discussing with Dr. Price and some of our colleagues from other districts the other day, as we mentioned last year, a lot of the districts chose park because of the hold harmless and the accountability level through 2017. So that was enticing to them. But in terms of development of the test, it's something that we'll closely monitor with DEAS and learn more as they go. And interestingly enough, just a side note, in Ed Weekly this week, Pearson, which ran park, and they had 26 states at one point, and now they're down to 6 states in the District of Columbia. They'll be selling test items a la carte to different states who are developing their own piece. So it's kind of interesting all around, but I think from my standpoint, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Price, but all the educators, this is a standard now for 17 or 18 years that we've been able to follow. And for us to change this year, even though it could be an opportunity to take park, it's a sunsetting exam, and it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So
yeah, we do have the choice. If we affirmatively choose to take park, we could do so. But again, given that it would be 1 year's worth of data, and frankly, I don't want to be held harmless. I want to be responsible for our continued improvement as a district. And it just seems like to go to an exam for 1 year does not make a lot of sense, especially with the inclusion of park-like items, which frankly they've been doing for many years in MCAS. And so some districts are choosing to go to park, even though for 1 year. I don't think it's worth the whiplash for our community. I don't think it's worth the whiplash for our educators and then I would also say, just as a parent of somebody who took park, the data that I received as a parent was not very helpful. And then most importantly, our teachers are used to looking at MCAS, analyzing MCAS. Park does not release the items, MCAS does. So there's some real value for teacher being able to identify needs of kids. So our recommendation to you is that we do nothing and that we continue on MCAS. No action is needed, but I thought it was really important to bring forward to make sure that we're all on the same page.
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, so last year, there was a requirement for us to vote to stay with
Correct.
MCAS Park, and the story was very consistent. The loss of the performance data and the feedback on where we were performing and where we needed to improve was not worth the transition. And while I don't think we're required to take a vote, and I think that the fact that there is a choice, after the discussion, if we would like to vote a voice of confidence to the decision, I would be very happy to receive that.
The only question I would have, Mr. Gillian, is there had been some interest in Park because it was going to be an automated test. And hypothetically, theoretically, we would get results back much more quickly.
Yeah, so two things. One is when our teachers come for the PD in the beginning of the year, they have the MCAS results that are embargoed, of course.
Yeah.
We don't want to get those out early by any means. But they're embargoed, but our teachers have access to them. So they know how exactly the kids they had last year did.
Yeah.
By domain and standard, where they were strong, where they were weak, and implications based on their own practice. But they also have the current roster of who's in their class on our longitudinal NASAP, and it has a breakdown of the incoming class. So, if you have a fourth grade class coming in and geometry is not a strength of theirs, it tells that grade level at a particular school or across the district that this may be an area that we need to focus on. No offense to the Park folks, but I did have a colleague from Newton bring in her daughters, and I read it, and she does really well with base 10 operations, and that was about the feedback in one of the particular domains. So the other thing I will say that is,
But we don't know how well. She was just above average.
I will say one last thing that I'm really excited tonight about the technology presentation, because regardless of what exam eventually comes, I think the next generation MCAS will probably be paper for a while, but eventually we'll be taking a computer-based exam, and that's coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Any other conversation?
No. So would you like a motion to
We don't have
support
to. I
the-
think it would be, if you don't feel that that's necessary, that's fine. I think it would be nice to be able to voice our confidence in the MCAS decision.
I'm good.
Okay.
If
I'm
you're confident,
confident.
we'll submit it to the DESE. It has to be in by the 18th. Perfect timing.
Okay.
I'm good.
Good time.
And clarification, we don't need to take a vote. This is at the superintendent's.
No, unless we choose to affirmatively change.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Moving on. We have a quick update from the subcommittee updates. Unfortunately, Mr. Treacy's not here, so we'll jump over facility rentals and fees. Anything from communications? Hearing nothing. Long-term fin plan? I think that's your area?
Yeah, we have not met.
Okay. Ed Foundation, the update? I think we're going to start revving up after the...
We started trying to make contacts and haven't gotten very far. Maybe the holidays are slow.
Yeah, I think the plan was to rev up after the holidays. Policy review?
So we're working on it. Mr. Limpert kindly went through the policies and started to tag what seemed to be most pressing, which was wonderful. Thank you. And Brian and I went through that, just going through the priorities and starting to bundle up policies together to maybe tackle it in a more systematic way. And thank you to Bev for going through and just checking to see when the policies were last updated. We have also just started to connect with MASC to also see if there's any policy updates that we have missed along the way, or I know they had just recently put out some new technology updates. So we're working on it, we're continuing to work on it, and it will be a long process, I think.
Very good. And our first priority is obviously the ones that are extremely impactful, for example, technology policies, social media policies and whatnot, that are no longer in line where I think where the technologies have moved. So we'll be reading out and providing policy updates in the coming meetings. And technology. Trying to remember.
That was a committee that we kind of put in abeyance,
You're right.
wondering if we needed it.
Right.
Sounds like we got a pretty good update.
Well, I think things are moving in the right direction, and unless you feel there's value in having having school committee input into those issues, other than the policy aspects that we just discussed, I don't see any reason to create that at this time.
Can't think of it.
Great. So moving on, public comment. We have no public left. School committee comment. Nothing.
Well, I'll start. I just want to thank the entire school, North Andover School Department, and all administrators, teachers, staff, teaching assistants, cafeteria staff, noon attendants, Kids Stop, community programs, guidance, bus drivers, crossing guards, IT, nurses, coaches, advisors, tutors, resource officers, and anyone else I forgot. But thank you for a wonderful 2015, for all the hard work you've done in this school year, and wishing you all a very happy 2016. So thank you.
Very good. Mr. McDevitt?
Looking forward to the break.
Yeah.
Coming back in 2016 and seeing the budget presentation.
Yeah, I know it's going to be a restful weekend or two, but we're looking forward to resuming after the first of the year, and we're going to be up to our gills in budget and budget discussion, so that we have to all look forward to.
I sort of felt like tonight we were having a school committee meeting just before a Super Bowl. I mean, we only have, 2.5 more hours before the movie is officially opening, right? So millions of people around the world will be.
Well, and unfortunately, this meeting overlapped with the winter concert, so I wish those who attended,
something
love to hear about
even
that.
more important. Yeah.
Look forward to seeing that on cam. So I too want to share happy holidays to all, restful weekends, and our next school committee meeting will be January 7th here at 7 p.m.
Ooh, and I forgot students, families, community members, and PTO.
Very good. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.